Michael Haight was born on January 7, 1980, in Seattle, Washington. However, at an early age, his family relocated to Cedar City, Utah, following the completion of his father's dental school. As a child, Michael was a typical young boy who enjoyed baseball, basketball, and soccer. He achieved the rank of Eagle Scout and excelled in school. After graduating high school in 1998, Michael spent the summer working at a fish plant in Alaska. He quickly earned the position of line manager, overseeing more than a dozen men. His work ethic and dedication were recognized, leading to his promotion. Michael went on a mission trip to South Brazil as a dedicated member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. This experience further deepened his faith and strengthened his commitment to his religious community. Upon his return to the United States, Michael pursued a degree in business at Southern Utah University, where he graduated in 2004. At Southern Utah University, Michael met his future wife, Tasha Earle. They fell in love and married in the St. George Temple on May 10, 2003. Michael appeared to be the epitome of a devoted husband and father to outsiders. He coached his children's sports teams, attended their school concerts, and spent time with them sledding and doing projects in the garage. However, on January 4, 2023, the facade Michael had built around his family came crashing down. On that day, 8 bodies were found in the Haight residence, leaving investigators and neighbors alike shocked and bewildered. Early that morning, Tasha Haight missed an online appointment, and Michael, her husband, failed to report for work. Their colleagues grew concerned and contacted the police to perform a welfare check at the Haight residence in Enoch. Officers arrived at the Haight residence, but upon knocking, they received no answer. As they walked around the property, the officers observed that it did not appear as if anyone was home. Knowing that the Haight's had 5 children, the police contacted the Iron County School District to verify if any of the children were at school that day. However, it was discovered that none of the children were present. When the police arrived at the Haight's home, they cleared the premises to ensure no immediate danger was present. After a thorough search, they confirmed that no one needed medical attention and that there were no signs of an active threat. The Haight's lived in a single-story residence with a basement. Detectives arrived on the scene a short time later after the home was declared a crime scene. Upon entering the main bedroom, the detectives noticed that the 4-year-old Gavin was laying flat on his stomach, his head turned to the left. One of his arms was placed under his head on a comfortable pillow, while a blanket covered a portion of his body. Similar to Gavin, Tasha was only partially covered by the blanket. The detectives discovered an older woman on the other side of the bed. She was later identified as Gail Earle, Tasha's mother. Gail was also lying on her back, her head resting on a pillow. Like her daughter and grandson, Gail was partially covered by a blanket. As the detectives continued their search of the Haight's home, they entered Briley's room, where they found the 12-year-old girl lying in bed. She was slightly inclined and partially covered with a blanket. In Eamon's room, the detectives discovered a 7-year-old boy lying face down in the corner of the room. Unlike his siblings, he did not have a pillow or blanket over him. Sienna, Eamon's twin sister, was found in her bedroom, lying on her left side in bed, her head resting on a pillow, also covered with a blanket. Macy, the eldest of the Haight children at 17 years old, was found in her bed, her head resting on a pillow and her body covered by the blanket. The detectives then found Michael Haight in the exercise room in the basement of the home. He was lying on top of a sleeping bag. All 8 victims were found dead from a gunshot wound. It did not take long before the detectives concluded that Michael Haight was the primary suspect. They theorized that he killed his wife, mother-in-law, and 5 children before taking his own life. As the detectives began their investigation, one neighbor provided crucial information that helped them piece together the timeline of the crime. The neighbor told the police that she had awoken at 3:30 a.m. to use the bathroom. Exiting her room, she heard a loud bang that sounded like fireworks. However, she quickly noticed that it was past the legal date for fireworks to be allowed in the neighborhood, leaving her feeling annoyed. The neighbor continued, stating that after the initial bang, she heard 2 more in quick succession. This noise was followed by a short pause, followed by another bang. That pattern continued, with a brief pause before the next bang, and a longer pause before a final bang. Based on the neighbor's statement and the condition of the 8 bodies found inside the house, the detectives speculated that the bangs she had heard around 3:30 a.m. were directly related to the events that unfolded that night. They believed that Michael Haight carried out the brutal killings during this specific time frame. During the investigation into the Haight family murders, detectives learned that an unnamed non-family member had reported abuse to the police in the Utah Division of Child and Family Services in 2020. This individual revealed that Macy, who was 14 years old at the time, confided in them about her fear of her father. That revelation sparked a further investigation into the Haight household. Following receipt of the DCFS report, Macy and her parents were interviewed separately. During Macy's interview, the interviewer learned disturbing information. Macy stated that there were times when her father choked her, and she feared he was going to kill her. She revealed that the violent attacks began in 2017 and spoke of a time when her father grabbed her by the shoulders and pushed her into a wooden piece of furniture. When the detectives interviewed Michael Haight, he denied ever hurting his daughter. He dismissed the incidents described by Macy as misunderstandings and blamed his emotional state on his father's death and the recent divorce of his brother. Michael stated that he had been upset about these issues and took it out on his older daughter. Tasha did not want to press criminal charges against Michael, and the Utah Department of Children and Family Services, the Enoch Police Department, and the Iron County Prosecutor's Office also declined to press charges. They had determined that the case did not meet the statute's requirements for prosecution. Additionally, a lethality assessment was conducted with Tasha, and according to her response, it did not indicate her relationship with Michael was lethal. However, victim services were made available to Tasha and the children for several months after the case was open. Through conversations with Tasha's friends, the detectives gained a different perspective on Michael Haight from that portrayed to the community. According to Tasha's friends, whenever they stopped by the house to visit, they often had to engage in conversation while the water was running in the kitchen to cover up any sound. Tasha believed that Michael was monitoring her conversations and eavesdropping on them. These friends also helped Tasha clean the house whenever they came over, so Michael would have nothing to yell at Tasha about. Tasha's friends shared that whenever they texted her, she would respond with short, positive messages, seemingly mindful of the possibility that Michael might read these messages. They believed this was a way of maintaining a positive image in front of Michael, as to suggest that everything was going smoothly in their marriage. The detectives assigned to the case have learned that Michael exhibited signs of highly controlling behavior towards his wife Tasha. One way in which Michael exerted control over Tasha was by taking her car keys and phone to prevent her from leaving. Another incident that raised suspicion about Michael was his reaction to Tasha purchasing a $30 rug from Walmart to replace a soiled one. Although Tasha had a legitimate need for the carpet, Michael became furious, claiming the purchase was excessive. Tasha confided in her friends that her 7-year-old son, Eamon, was acting more and more like his father, Michael, emulating his bad behavior. Whenever Tasha told Eamon to do something, he responded, "That's not my job." This behavior was concerning for Tasha, as it reflected Eamon's lack of responsibility and disregard for authority. Michael often dismissed or ignored Tasha's instructions, and Eamon seemed to follow suit. According to Tasha's friends, in 2022, Tasha dared indulge in a small act of self-care. Despite the demands of her responsibilities, she decided to get her nails done, a relatively rare occurrence for her. However, her husband Michael did not allow it to happen, placing strict restrictions on her freedom. After Tasha's indulgence, she felt renewed confidence in beauty. She told Michael that she would be getting her nails done on a monthly basis, a decision that did not sit well with him. Angered by his wife's decision, Michael expressed his disapproval, questioning how much this new habit would cost. To alleviate Michael's concerns, Tasha calmly explained that maintaining this self-care ritual costs $25 per month. However, Michael remained unconvinced, arguing that Tasha was taking food from their children's mouths by spending money on her nails. His perspective was rooted in control and a deep financial responsibility towards their family. Around the same time, Tasha started prioritizing her self-care and began losing weight. After years of her husband calling her fat and ugly, Michael was furious that she was shedding pounds. He accused Tasha of cheating on him, trying to justify the sudden change in her physical appearance. Michael's controlling behavior reached new heights as he attempted to manipulate Tasha's weight loss. He pleaded with her to stop losing weight, concerned that other men might look at her with desire. Underlying this demand were his deep-seated insecurities and desire for complete control over his wife's body and behavior. Tasha's friends also told the police about when the family kitchen table unexpectedly broke, and Tasha needed to buy a new table. However, Michael refused to give her the money to buy one. Frustrated by the situation, Tasha decided to take matters into her own hands. She chose to refinish the old table, hoping to improve its appearance and functionality. However, this act of defiance did not sit well with Michael, as he did not give her permission to do so. Michael Haight had a stingy attitude towards spending during the holiday season. Despite his significant income, he provided only $100 to Tasha for each of their 5 children to buy presents. Tasha always gave her children a fulfilling Christmas, yet Michael received a substantial paycheck from his job at Allstate. However, he refused to allocate additional funds to his wife and children, His rationale was that he didn't see the need to provide them with more of what he believed was rightfully his. Michael's obsession with reducing waste and conserving resources led him to impose strict rules on Tasha's household habits. She had to wash out and reuse plastic bags, even if they were used once or multiple times. This excessive demand for reusing bags placed additional responsibilities and burdens on Tasha, leaving her feeling overwhelmed. Further, Michael's desire to control every aspect of Tasha's life extended to her cleaning and baby care routines. He insisted on having the cleaning and baby wipes, claiming it was more eco-friendly and cost-effective. However, this demand compromised Tasha's comfort and hygiene and created unnecessary stress. If Tasha failed to adhere to the instructions set by Michael, she faced serious consequences. He made it clear that disobedience would lead to a lot of trouble for her. This threat created a sense of fear and submission in Tasha, leaving her with no choice but to comply with Michael's demands. According to Tasha's friends, she confided in them that although Michael had been mean to her throughout their marriage, he had never extended this mistreatment to their children until the late 2010s. However, as time went on, the abuse directed towards Macy intensified, leading her to consider taking her own life. Michael had extremely high expectations for his daughter Macy. He expected her to earn straight A's all the time, even though Macy was already struggling with the weight of her father's abuse. The pressure to meet his unrealistic expectations proved to be overwhelming for Macy. Macy's friends told the detectives about another disturbing incident in the Haight home. Michael returned home one evening to find Macy with her head in her mother's lap. Angry and frustrated, Michael instructed Macy to get up and clean her room. This incident left Macy deeply shaken, as she recalled looking into her father's eyes and seeing them filled with hatred and pure evil. The detectives uncovered another incident where 7-year-old Briley was playing with a changing table and did not stop when Michael told her. This incident led to Michael blaming his wife, Tasha, for their children's behavior. He labeled them as the worst children in the world, who were disrespectful and awful. Michael not only blamed Tasha, but also called her fat and ugly, all in front of their 5 children. It was during this distressing incident that Tasha decided to pursue an exit strategy and file for divorce from Michael after 20 years of marriage. The incident, which showcased Michael's abusive behavior and lack of control over his anger, served as a wake-up call for Tasha. She saw the negative impact this behavior was having on her children and realized that staying in the marriage was not an option. Divorce was difficult for Tasha. She spent over 2 decades with Michael. However, she realized that her children's well-being and safety were more important than any marital bond. On December 21st, 2022, Tasha filed for divorce from her husband Michael. However, she asked for the divorce papers to be delivered after the holidays, wanting one last normal Christmas for her 5 children before the separation. She knew that Michael's behavior would likely escalate once he received the papers, and she did not want the holiday festivities tarnished for everyone. The divorce papers were delivered to Michael's Allstate office 2 days after Christmas. Despite his recent actions, Michael called Tasha, acting completely normal, asking her about her day, as if she hadn't served him with divorce papers mere minutes ago. He told Tasha to leave, but insisted that she leave the children behind. But Tasha stood her ground and refused to leave the house without them. Despite Michael's demands, Tasha decided to take the children with her to her mother's home in Laverton, Utah. Later that evening, Michael showed up at his mother-in-law's house, attempting to convince Tasha to go for a ride with him. Tasha, however, refused and confided in her friends that she had a bad feeling about going anywhere alone with Michael. After Tasha filed for divorce, Gail Earl, Tasha's mother, moved in to provide support for both Tasha and the children. However, Michael's actions during this time further exacerbated the situation. Michael did not vacate the family home. Instead, he chose to move into the basement, where the fitness room was. In this room, he slept on a sleeping bag with a pillow on the floor, with his clothes hung on hangers piled on a couch outside the door. Tasha confided in her friends that she had noticed a discrepancy in their children's saving accounts, which contained $20,000. She discovered that Michael had secretly transferred the money out of these accounts without her knowledge or consent. Furthermore, Tasha inherited several firearms from her father after his death, including hunting rifles and a handgun. At the start of January 2023, Tasha discovered all the firearms were missing from her house. Upon further investigation, it was revealed that Michael had removed the weapons, leaving Tasha and her family vulnerable in case of an emergency. Michael and Tasha's oldest child, Macy, had expressed to several of her friends that she welcomed her parents' divorce. Macy confided that there would be peace without her father, Michael, in the home. She yearned for the tranquility that a divorce would bring. Furthermore, Macy had a secret phone that she hid in her room, According to one of her friends, Macy used this phone to record her father when he acted crazy. She confided in this friend that she was doing this to gather evidence to support her parents' divorce. However, Tasha found the phone and hid it away. Macy's younger sister, Briley, also endured a tumultuous home life. Due to the constant drama at home, Briley often sought refuge at her neighbor's house. This neighbor had grandchildren of a similar age, and Briley found solace in the company of these children. Briley disclosed to a friend that she was happy about her parents' impending divorce. She even mentioned purchasing some new books, but she refrained from telling her father out of fear that he might get angry with her. On January 3, 2023, Tasha met with her attorney to discuss her ongoing concerns about her divorce from her abusive husband, Michael. During their conversation, Tasha revealed that although Michael was still living in the family home, she was relieved that he had recently relocated to the basement. Given Michael's volatile behavior, the attorneys pressed Tasha on whether she ever experienced any concern for her or her children's safety. Despite Michael's occasional outbursts, Tasha reassured her attorneys that she never feared for her or her children's well-being. In hindsight, it is clear that Tasha's optimism and misplaced faith in her husband were tragically misplaced. The investigation into the Haight family shooting was a harrowing journey for police detectives as they pieced together the chilling sequence of events that led to the tragic outcome. One chilling discovery stood out amid the digital evidence collected from the family's computers and cell phones. On December 30th, mere days before the deadly shooting, Michael conducted a disturbing Google search. At 10:41 p.m., Michael's queries delved into firearms and shooting-related topics. These searches and other evidence gathered during the investigation painted a chilling picture of Michael's intentions. The search results revealed alarming questions, such as, how loud is a 9mm gunshot? What does a gunshot sound like? I heard gunshots near my house. What do I do? If you heard a single gunshot in your neighborhood at night, would you immediately recognize it as such? Would you either way be alerted enough to call the police? How loud is a gunshot in the house? Would a neighbor hear a gunshot in the garage? How loud is a 40mm pistol? In the note Michael crafted before he took his life, it said he preferred to rot in hell than to continue enduring what he described as controlling behavior by his wife. Michael expressed that he could not handle the situation for another day and was determined to put an end to the manipulation and control he had been subjected to. Michael's note expressed deep frustration and desperation. He mentioned repeatedly asking for help, but no one seemed to listen. In this note, Michael emphasized his determination to not be a burden to society. The details of this case have left many in shock and disbelief, as it painted the picture of a deeply dysfunctional family plagued by violence. Michael's actions were premeditated and calculated. He carefully planned the murders, ensuring that his wife and children were unaware until it was too late. By all accounts, Lindsay Musgrove was a kind and caring person who graduated with a biology degree from Quinnipiac University in 2012. 2 years later, she earned her nursing license and studied at Massachusetts General Hospital Institute of Health Professions. Lindsay dedicated her life to helping others as a labor and delivery nurse at Massachusetts General Hospital. Lindsay quickly established herself as a consummate caregiver, and her colleagues loved to work with her. Known for her attention to detail and compassion, Lindsay's patients requested her as their preferred nurse for future deliveries. Her ability to soothe nervous parents and guide them through labor was remarkable. In 2016, Lindsay married Patrick Clancy, a computer software engineer. Just 1 year after their marriage, Lindsay and Patrick welcomed their daughter, Cora. Cora was a loving and caring older sister who dreamed of becoming a doctor and a mommy. Dawson, their second child born in 2019, was a bright and charismatic boy. His laughter and infectious smile lit up every room he entered. In 2022, Lindsay gave birth to Callan. Callan was a happy and easygoing child. He was often referred to as Happy Callan by his mom and dad. Lindsay, Patrick, and their children lived in a beautiful house in Duxbury, Massachusetts. The house, purchased for $500,000, had everything they could have asked for. Their backyard was adorned with a white picket fence and a playground, creating the perfect setting for an American dream home. To their friends and family, Lindsay and Patrick had what many would consider a perfect marriage. The couple rarely fought, and their unwavering affection for each other was evident in the way they exchanged "I love yous" several times a day. They were the epitome of a loving couple, radiating happiness and contentment. Patrick was a loving and dedicated father to Cora, Dawson, and Callan. Their bond was unbreakable. He was always in the backyard engaging in playful activities with his 3 children. There was nothing more important to Lindsay than Cora, Dawson, and Callan. She loved being a mother and believed that raising children was the most rewarding and fulfilling thing a person could do with their life. Pictures of her children filled the walls of her home, and she constantly shared images of them on social media. She would write posts expressing her gratitude and joy, such as, "I feel like the luckiest mama in the world," and "so unbelievably thankful for this family and life." Those who knew Lindsay attested to her dedication as a mother, describing her as someone who would leave parties early to return home to her babies. She truly hated hearing them cry, even when sleep training them. Lindsay's commitment to her children was evident in every aspect of her relationship. After the birth of Cora and Dawson, Lindsay's emotions became overwhelming. The weight of motherhood proved to be a significant challenge for her, and she struggled to navigate the complicated waters of motherhood. However, she declared on Facebook that her experience with motherhood with Callan was going more smoothly, as she was focused on exercise, nutrition, and rest. She was taking proactive steps to address her emotional well-being. However, as time went on, Lindsay started to experience anxiety about returning to work after her maternity leave. The pressure of being a full-time mother and balancing her career became overwhelming for her. She sought solace in various forms of therapy, including visits to multiple psychs and being prescribed a range of medications. By September 2022, Lindsay's anxiety levels had reached an all-time high. In search of relief, she decided to seek further help. She went for an evaluation at the Women and Infant Center for Women's Behavioral Health in Providence. Unfortunately, she was not diagnosed with postpartum depression during this visit. On January 1st, 2023, she confessed to her husband Patrick that she had thoughts of harming herself and her children. Alarmed and concerned, Lindsay decided to seek help and admitted herself to the McLean Hospital for mental health treatment. She would spend the next 5 days in the hospital, receiving the necessary care. When Lindsay was discharged from McLean Hospital, the doctors determined that the young woman posed no danger to herself or others. However, no one knew the true extent of her struggles. Throughout January, Lindsay appeared to be getting better. Her family went on several outings to museums and restaurants, and Lindsay herself expressed that she no longer had thoughts of harming herself. Even her mother noticed a change in her text messages, as her tone appeared more upbeat. However, no one knew that Lindsay was battling her own demons beneath the surface. On January 24th, 2023, those demons finally took a terrible toll. On this day, Lindsay's true thoughts and feelings came to light in the most devastating manner. January 23rd, 2023 began as a regular day for the Clancy family. As the morning progressed, Lindsay took the children to the doctor for a checkup. Her daughter Cora was scheduled for a routine examination with her pediatrician. Upon their return home, Lindsay spent quality time with her children, enjoying an afternoon of play in the snow. Taking the opportunity to capture these moments, she snapped a few pictures and shared them with her husband Patrick and her mother. The happy scene painted a seemingly normal picture of family life. On that fateful day, Patrick was working from home in the basement. Around 4 p.m., after Lindsay and the children came inside from playing in the snow, she Googled kids Miralax. She also used Apple Maps to calculate how long it would take for someone to drive to the 3V restaurant near Kingston. Lindsay also searched the CVS website, called the CVS in Kingston, and asked if they had children Miralax. She then texted Patrick in the basement office and said, "Any chance you want to do takeout from the 3V? I didn't cook anything. It's been a long day." Although 3V was a bit out of the way for Lindsay and Patrick to eat from, there were closer restaurants they had ordered from before. Patrick informed Lindsay that he agreed to check the menu and select what he wanted to eat. He chose the scallop and pork belly risotto, while Lindsay opted for the Mediterranean Power Bowl. At 5:10 p.m., Lindsay called the 3V to place the order and mentioned Patrick as the designated pickup person. At 5:15 p.m., Patrick left the home, and Lindsay sent him a text message as a reminder to pick up the children's medications at the CVS. CCTV footage showed that Patrick arrived at the CVS at 5:32 p.m. However, he did not receive an answer during his attempt to ask about the brand Lindsay preferred. 1 minute later, at 5:34 p.m., Lindsay finally returned Patrick's phone call, which lasted for 14 minutes. Although the conversation seemed normal, Patrick later shared that he sensed that Lindsay was in the midst of doing something while talking to him. It was chilly outside as Patrick arrived home at 6 p.m. after stopping to pick up dinner and medication at CVS. As Patrick pulled into his driveway and entered his home, he noticed an eerie silence that hung in the air. The usually bustling house was unusually quiet, and the absence of the family sounds of his 3 children and wife, Lindsay, was unsettling. Panic began to settle in Patrick's mind as he searched for any signs of life in his home. Lindsay and his children, Cora, Dawson, and Callan, were nowhere to be found. His heart raced with worry as he called Lindsay's cell phone at 6:09 p.m., hoping to hear her voice on the other end of the line. Unfortunately, there was no response. With growing concern, Patrick made his way up the stairs to the master bedroom. The silence was deafening, and each step he took echoed through the empty house. As he approached the door, he noticed it was locked, which was even more unsettling as Lindsay had never locked herself in the bedroom before. Patrick turned the knob, but it wouldn't budge. He exerted more force, but the stubborn lock refused to give way. Desperate to find his wife, Patrick resorted to pounding on the door, hoping to elicit a response. But all he received in return was silence. Frustrated but determined, Patrick continued to struggle with the locked bedroom door. After what seemed like an eternity, he managed to force it open, revealing a scene that would be etched in his memory forever. Blood stained the floor and windowsill, and a bloody knife lay ominously on Lindsay's bedside table. The sight sent a shiver down Patrick's spine as he immediately recognized something unspeakable had happened inside the room. Walking toward the bloody windowsill, Patrick peered outside and saw his wife, Lindsay, lying on the ground in the backyard. His heart pounding with fear, Patrick frantically dialed 911 as he ran down the stairs and outside to Lindsay. Patrick found Lindsay lying face up in the backyard, her body soaked in blood. Slashes were visible on both her neck and wrists. Lindsay was conscious, but barely responsive. Panic washed over Patrick as he desperately tried to make sense of the situation. "What have you done?" he asked, his voice trembling with fear. In an eerie and detached voice, Lindsay replied that she had attempted to take her own life and jumped out the window. As Patrick's mind raced, filled with confusion and concern for the welfare of their children, he had to ask the unthinkable. Where were the 3 young children? Lindsay coldly replied, "In the basement." Patrick remained outside with Lindsay until the police and paramedics arrived, staying on the phone with the 911 dispatcher the entire time. The dispatcher could hear the tension in Patrick's voice as he relayed the grim situation and stayed by his wife's side. The paramedics quickly arrived on the scene and began assessing Lindsay's condition. They worked tirelessly to stabilize her and provide any necessary medical attention. Meanwhile, Patrick's thoughts were consumed by the well-being of his children. With the paramedics preoccupied with Lindsay, Patrick decided to search for his children. While still on the phone with the 911 dispatcher, Patrick walked back into their home, his heart pounding with fear. He descended the staircase into the basement where Lindsay had said their children were. With every step, he called out, "Guys," hoping that they would respond to him. But there was no response. As Patrick reached the bottom of the staircase, the atmosphere grew tense and foreboding. The silence was deafening, and a sense of dread filled the air. Suddenly, the dispatcher on the end of the line heard a scream, as if someone or something was in agony. Upon entering the basement, Patrick discovered his 3 children, Cora, Callan, and Dawson, lying unconscious on the floor. Each child had an exercise band tightly wrapped around their neck. As panic set in, Patrick immediately called for help. Patrick begged his children to wake up and breathe, his voice filled with desperation. He screamed for the police officers upstairs, assisting his wife, Lindsay. In a matter of minutes, the officers descended the stairs and witnessed a horrific sight. 3 innocent children, unconscious and unresponsive, lay lifeless on the cold floor. In the midst of the chaos and turmoil, Patrick uttered the words, "She killed the kids," referring to his wife, Lindsay. With each word, his desperation turned to anguish as he realized the extent of his wife's unimaginable act. Cora, his 5-year-old daughter, and Dawson, his 3-year-old son, were pronounced dead at the scene. Baby Callan, just 7 months old, was still alive, but his injuries were severe. Despite the efforts of the medical team, the infant succumbed to his injuries several days later in the hospital, with his father by his side, holding him in his arms as he took his final breaths. The tragic events that unfolded in less than 20 minutes had shattered Patrick's world, leaving him grief-stricken and desperate for answers. Lindsay, in the meantime, was taken to Boston's Children's Hospital to be treated for the injuries she sustained when she jumped out of the window and fell 20 feet in an attempt to take her own life. She was charged with 3 counts of murder, 3 counts of strangulation or suffocation, and 3 counts of assault and battery with a dangerous weapon. Days after the horrific events unfolded, Patrick Clancy expressed his feelings on a GoFundMe page created for him and his family. Despite the unimaginable pain and shock, he displayed love and forgiveness for his wife. However, he admitted that the shock and pain of the entire ordeal were relentless, leaving his family in a state of profound grief. The GoFundMe campaign established to cover the expenses associated with Cora, Dawson, and Callan's funeral received generous support from the public. However, many individuals expressed that they were effectively funding Lindsay's defense by contributing to the campaign. This statement sparked controversy and raised concerns about the potential misuse of funds. Lindsay's attorneys later clarified that their legal fees were not paid through the GoFundMe campaign. Instead, her parents were responsible for covering these expenses. Despite the controversy surrounding the GoFundMe campaign, it managed to raise over $1 million. However, as of this time, the campaign is no longer accepting donations as it reached its goal. During a brief hearing held on February 3, 2023, in Plymouth District Court, a judge granted a request by Lindsay's attorney for the police to waive security rules at Brigham and Women's Hospital in Boston, where Lindsay was a patient. The request was made to allow the examination of Lindsay by a forensic psychiatrist to access her for symptoms of postpartum depression. Lindsay's attorneys argued that her self-inflicted injuries had left her movement extremely limited, and she posed no threat to anyone. Lindsay's attorney further contended that Lindsay was subject to a horrific overmedication of prescription drugs. Among the medications listed by her attorney were Klonopin, Valium, Ativan, Zoloft, amitriptyline, mirtazapine, Prozac, mood stabilizers such as Lamictal and Seroquel, as well as buspirone, hydroxyzine, and Ambien. She had been prescribed a total of 13 medications within 4 months for the treatment of mood disorders, anxiety, and psychosis. According to Lindsay's attorneys, one of the side effects of overmedication on these drugs was suicidal and homicidal intentions. The attorney believed that a thorough examination by a forensic psychiatrist was necessary to determine the extent of her symptoms and the potential risks associated with her medication regimen. The Plymouth County prosecutor painted a vivid picture of her actions, alleging that she acted with extreme atrocity and cruelty, challenging the defense's assertion that her postpartum mental condition and prescription medication played a role in her homicidal acts. During the court proceedings, Lindsay sat silently in a hospital room, watching intently through a monitor. As the details of this tragic case unfolded in court, a not guilty plea was entered on behalf of Lindsay. When Lindsay Clancy committed the heinous act of murdering her 3 children, she committed filicide, the deliberate act of killing one's offspring. According to Dr. Philip Resnick, a psychiatrist who specializes in the area of filicide, there are 5 primary reasons why a parent would commit filicide. One surprising motive behind filicide is a sense of altruism. In some cases, parents may feel that by ending their child's life, they are sparing them suffering or preventing a tragic future. This motive is difficult to understand and comprehend, as it flies in the face of natural parental instincts to protect and nurture. Another potential reason for filicide is acute psychosis. With mental health disorders like schizophrenia or bipolar disorder, people may experience delusions or hallucinations that lead them to perceive their children as threats or sources of harm. In these cases, the person's perception of reality becomes distorted, and they may believe they are saving their child from harm. In some cases, parents may have second thoughts or regrets about having a child. They may harbor disappointment, frustration, or even hatred towards their children. This sentiment can escalate to the point where the parent feels compelled to take drastic measures to eliminate the child. Physical abuse can be a catalyst for filicide. When parents subject their children to severe or ongoing physical abuse, it can create a toxic environment where the child becomes the victim and the parent becomes the perpetrator. In the most severe cases, the parent may feel a sense of relief or release after physically harming their child, leading to the ultimate act of filicide. Filicide can also arise in the context of spousal revenge. In instances where one parent feels betrayed, abandoned, or abused by the other, they may turn their anger towards their child. By harming or eliminating their child, they may seek revenge or exert control over their partner, demonstrating the depth of their despair and frustration. The shocking tragedy raised questions about the connection between postpartum depression, PPD, psychosis, and homicidal behavior. Lindsay's attorneys argued that a combination of postpartum psychosis and overmedication were to blame for her actions. After childbirth, the levels of hormones in a woman's body drop quickly, leading to chemical changes in the brain and mood swings. This natural process, known as the postpartum period, can cause feelings of overwhelm, loss of energy, intrusive thoughts of harming oneself or the baby, loss of sleep, and a variety of other physical and emotional challenges. However, postpartum psychosis is a far more severe and dangerous condition that affects the mother's sense of reality. This condition affects approximately 1 to 2 of every 1,000 deliveries and is characterized by a sudden and severe loss of sanity. Symptoms may include delusions, hallucinations, paranoia, rapid mood swings, and disorganized thinking. During the investigation into the murder of Lindsay Clancy's 3 children, a diary entry was discovered on her phone dated October 25, 2022. This journal entry, written months before the heinous crime, revealed distressing insights into her state of mind in the days leading up to the killings. In the diary entry, Lindsay expressed frustration and resentment towards her children, specifically Cora and Dawson. Lindsay wrote that sometimes she resented them because they prevented her from treating their infant son Callan like her first child. She expressed her discontentment when Cora and Dawson returned from preschool, stating that their bad blood seemed to rub off on her. According to Lindsay, she felt depressed and her emotions were affecting her children. Additionally, the detectives discovered that just 4 days before the killings, Lindsay conducted a search on her phone that read, "Can you treat a sociopath?" She also looked up ways to kill on her mobile device. The revelation that Lindsay harbored resentment towards her children and sought information on how to carry out such a heinous crime was deeply disturbing. During an arraignment in October 2023, it was revealed during the arraignment that toxicology reports had revealed the presence of certain medications in Lindsay's system. The reports indicated that she had been prescribed antidepressants, antipsychotics, sedatives, and an anticonvulsant, all of which were found to have reached therapeutic levels. The prosecution's case focused on proving that Lindsay had premeditated the murders and carried out a deliberate act of violence. They argued that the presence of medication in her system played no role in her actions, as she had already made the decision to kill her children. Further, the timing and level of the medications further supported their theory that Lindsay had acted with a clear mind and without any impairment caused by medication. In 2024, Patrick Clancy completed the Boston Marathon in his children's names, raising funds for the Boston Children's Hospital. During this time, Lindsay, who is facing trial for the murder of her children, remains committed to her treatment at the Tewksbury Hospital. She is currently described as permanently paralyzed. Mike Ruschel, who married his first wife Dee Dee Hoffman in 1979 while they were students at the University of Florida in Gainesville, was a man who seemingly had it all. From a young age, Mike displayed a remarkable set of characteristics. He was a Boy Scout who nearly attained the rank of Eagle Scout and was an altar boy, showing his moral and ethical values. Upon attending college at the University of Florida, Mike continued to thrive. He actively engaged in a fraternity, which offered him a support community and opportunities for growth and development. Furthermore, his athletic abilities and academic achievements made him an exemplary student. Mike graduated with a master's in business administration from the University of Miami. This academic achievement set him on a path of personal and professional success. Dee Dee, Mark's wife, once remarked that Mike was a genuinely supportive husband who never physically abused her. However, Mike's relationship with Dee Dee had reached a breaking point beneath the facade of success. They had 2 daughters, Caroline and Kate, whom Mike loved dearly. Despite his professional achievements, Mike was often away from his family, spending long hours traveling for work. As a result, his daughters grew accustomed to his absence during their formative years. After 25 years of marriage, Dee Dee approached Mike and requested a divorce. Dee Dee moved out of the shared residence. This arrangement was intentional, as Dee Dee wanted to give Caroline and Kate a place to return to when they returned from college. Mike found himself a single man for the first time in a long while at 49. Feeling the need to find love again, Mike decided to embark on internet dating in the mid-2000s. At this time, internet dating was gaining widespread popularity. Mike created an account on Match.com, and it wasn't long before he connected with a 38-year-old Hispanic nurse named Susan. As Mike and Susan's relationship progressed, they went on wonderful dates and trips together. Not long after their initial meeting, Susan moved into Mike's home, taking over a space once occupied by Mike's ex-wife, Dee Dee. In an interview with 48 Hours, Dee Dee shared her perspective on Susan's arrival into her ex-husband's life. According to Dee Dee, everything that was once hers suddenly became Susan's, including her dog. When she first met her father's girlfriend, Mike's daughter, Caroline, expressed her concerns about Susan. Caroline was taken aback about how much Susan drank during their first meeting. Despite consuming several martinis, Susan miraculously remained upright, able to walk, and even engage in conversation. According to Caroline, this behavior was unlike anything she had ever witnessed, and it set off alarm bells in her mind. Despite Caroline's reservations, Mike and Susan eventually tied the knot in 2007. This union marked a turning point in their relationship, as Susan stopped working and Mike ceased traveling for work. Instead, Mike purchased a local business, Ocala Dental, which would become the center of their lives. Mike Ruschel and his wife Susan appeared to be an ideal couple to the outside world. They owned a home in a wealthy Alachua County neighborhood of Hale Plantation in Florida, and they often joked about their perfect life together. However, behind their facade, Mike and Susan faced significant struggles in their marriage. During the summer of 2007, Mike drafted a prenuptial agreement with Susan. This sudden development raised eyebrows among their friends and family, as they'd always been portrayed as a strong and united couple. What prompted Mike to propose a prenup suddenly? The catalyst for Mike's decision was an incident at one of his daughter's house parties. Susan, known for her fierce temperament, used excessive profanity in front of Mike's daughter, causing a heated argument. This incident led Mike to consider protecting his assets in case of a potential divorce. Although Mike and Susan appeared to be financially stable, there were underlying issues beneath the surface. Susan admitted to Mike that she had accumulated $35,000 in credit card debt, which deeply concerned him. One of the main sources of tension in Mike and Susan's relationship was Susan's dislike of Mike's daughters. Caroline said she could only interact with her father when he was alone in his car. Susan's dislike for his daughters created a barrier, making it difficult for Caroline to have meaningful conversations with her father. Despite the difficulties they faced, Mike and Susan's relationship seemed to stabilize, at least on the surface. In 2016, when Caroline announced her engagement, Susan became deeply involved and wanted a significant role in every aspect of the wedding. Susan insisted on throwing her a bridal shower, a gesture typically reserved for the mother or sister of the bride. As Susan planned the shower, she made a conscious decision to exclude Caroline's mother's friends from the guest list. However, she ensured her friends and family were in attendance. Despite the initial strangeness of Susan's deep involvement in planning the shower, Caroline admitted that the day was enjoyable. Susan put in considerable effort to make the occasion fun and memorable for all participants. When Caroline was looking for her wedding gown, Susan accompanied her to the bridal boutique. Together, they browsed through the various dresses until Caroline found one that captured her imagination. Susan even handed over her credit card to pay for the $11,000 gown. In November 2017, Caroline married at the Oeka Castle in Long Island, surrounded by 160 guests. The event mirrored the grandeur and luxury of a wedding fit for royalty. Before Mike walked his daughter Caroline down the aisle, she noticed an unusual mark on his face. When Caroline inquired about the mark, Mike brushed her concerns aside, not wanting to upset her on this special day. However, 3 weeks after Caroline married, Mike confided in her that the mark, now a long white scar, had come at the hands of his wife, Susan. He revealed that Susan had physically abused him and that she had been arrested for domestic battery after becoming violent while intoxicated. Susan's version of the incident was that after her stepdaughter Caroline's wedding, her husband Mike confided in her that the wedding had gone $150,000 over budget. This revelation angered Susan, and the argument between her and Mike escalated. During the altercation, Susan threw a mobile phone at Mike, and she pushed him in an effort to defuse the situation. However, Susan herself was the one who eventually called 911 to report the incident. According to Susan, she offered to go to the couple's beach condo to calm things down. However, a significant amount of time passed without her leaving the residence to head to the beach. As a result, the police arrested Susan when she still had not left the premises. The court ultimately ordered Susan to stay away from Mike, and she sought alcohol and consulting services as well as anger management assistance. Several weeks later, Mike ultimately decided not to pursue charges against Susan, and the case was dropped. Susan moved out of their home and into a condo at Ponte Vedra. While this provided a reprieve from the couple's ongoing drama, it would be short-lived. On February 3, 2018, at 4 a.m., Michael Ruschel made a chilling call to 911 from his home in Gainesville, Florida. He informed the dispatcher that someone had entered his house and his wife, Susan, was bleeding profusely. When the police arrived at the scene, they discovered Susan lying severely injured on a bed in the master bedroom. Medics were immediately summoned, and with a sense of urgency, they rushed her to the closest hospital. As Susan was rushed to the operating room, the surgeons worked tirelessly to save her in critical condition. The odds were not in her favor, and the possibility of survival seemed slim. Meanwhile, a detective arrived at Mike's home, now cordoned off as a crime scene. The detective began his search of the premises, meticulously examining the scene for any clues. What the detective found was a scene that sent shivers down his spine. Inside the master bedroom, there was a substantial amount of blood on the bed, as well as a bloody bent knife. However, there was no sign of forced entry on any doors or shattered windows. In an effort to piece together the events that led up to the incident, the detective obtained security camera footage from Mike's home. However, after carefully examining the footage, the detective failed to find anyone fleeing from Mike's house. Susan miraculously survived the ordeal. but was left with significant wounds on her wrist, stomach, and neck. When Susan regained consciousness in the hospital, she provided a shocking revelation to the detectives assigned to the case. According to Susan, there was no intruder. It was Mike who had attacked her. She claimed Mike had concocted a story about a person breaking into their home and assaulting them. According to Susan, she and Mike started fighting while they were at a local restaurant for dinner. Susan said that she and Mike decided to return home in separate cars. Upon arriving home, Susan went straight to bed, and as she was falling asleep, she suddenly felt a sharp stabbing sensation. When Susan opened her eyes, Mike was standing over her with a knife in his hand. Panic and confusion filled her mind as she realized that she was in danger. Susan yelled out at Mike, "Michael, you are going to kill me." To her horror, Mike replied, "That's exactly what I want to do." Susan's cries for help went unheard as Mike continued to stab her, leaving her body covered in blood and suffering immense pain. For an hour, Susan lay in the bed, bleeding profusely and fearing for her life. Mike told Susan that he wouldn't kill her if she stuck with his story that an intruder had broken into the house and stabbed her. Desperate to stay alive, Susan reluctantly agreed to go along with Mike's plan. He then changed his clothes and called 911, pretending that a robbery had taken place. Mike Rochelle was arrested on charges related to the attempted murder of his wife Susan. The news surprised everyone, including Mike's ex-wife Dee Dee and his daughters Caroline and Kate. Dee Dee, who had divorced Mike years earlier, was in disbelief when she heard about the arrest. During their marriage, she had never witnessed any signs of violence or aggression. She couldn't comprehend the idea that her former husband was being accused of such a heinous crime. Similarly, Caroline and Kate were overwhelmed by their father's arrest. They had always admired and respected Mike, considering him a generous and kind man. The idea that he would commit such a violent act against their stepmother seemed inconceivable. As the situation unfolded, additional charges were brought against Mike. In addition to the attempted murder charge, he was indicted on charges of false imprisonment, obstruction, and tampering with evidence. These additional charges further complicated the case and increased the severity of the situation. Due to Mike's wealth and affluence, the judge decided to set a bond of $2.5 million on the additional charges. However, it was agreed that no bond would be granted on the attempted murder charge, considering the serious nature of the crime. The arrest of Mike Rochelle created shockwaves throughout the community. Many people who knew him and his family found it difficult to reconcile their perception of him with the nature of the charges he faced. Several months after his February 2018 arrest on June 29th, Mike was arrested and charged with a criminal attempt to solicit and conspire on a capital felony. The charges were based on allegations that Mike had tried to hire an inmate to murder his wife Susan. According to the state's attorney office, Mike sought assistance from 33-year-old Roderick Germain McCullen, who also faced charges in relation to the alleged murder-for-hire plot. The trial, which took place in 2019, provided insight into the tumultuous dynamics of Mike and Susan's relationship. Throughout the trial, Mike presented a narrative that depicted a strained and turbulent marriage. Mike's testimony revealed that he and his wife had limited visitors to their home. According to Mike, this restriction was primarily due to Susan's reluctance to have his friends from his former university's advisory board over. Another aspect that created friction between Mike and Susan was his philanthropic endeavors. Mike testified that he enjoyed making charitable donations, which occasionally caused contention with his wife. According to Mike, Susan would often threaten to divorce him if he attended committee meetings or country club meetings, or if he made donations without her permission. While Mike claimed to have faced conflict over charitable contributions, Susan's spending habits seemingly went unchecked. Mike testified that Susan often spent money on clothing and jewelry without consulting him. This disparity in financial properties added to the strain of their marriage, as Mike felt frustrated and overwhelmed by the constant financial strain. Mike also testified that there were times when Susan resorted to violence as a means of resolving conflicts. In a July 2016 incident, Mike claimed that Susan threw a wine bottle at him from the top of the staircase, hitting him in the shoulders. That was not an isolated incident. Mike testified that there were other occasions where Susan threw vases and heavy mugs at him. Despite numerous violent incidents, Mike told the court that he never reported any of them to police, nor did he seek help. However, Mike took pictures of his injuries and shared them with his daughter, Caroline. Mike maintained throughout the trial that despite enduring abuse, he loved his wife and wanted to remain married to her. Yet Mike stated he was walking on eggshells around her, constantly fearing retaliation. Mike invited Susan for dinner on February 3, 2018, with the hope that they could work on their relationship. He decided to take her to their favorite steakhouse, hoping that a change of scenery and a romantic dinner would foster reconciliation. During the dinner, Mike received a text message from his daughter Caroline, which angered Susan. The dinner became awkward and tense. Susan's anger escalated, and she left the restaurant in an Uber at the end of the meal. Mike followed her in his car. During the ride home, Susan sent Mike a text message that read, "Good luck with that bitch," referring to his daughter Caroline. Susan believed that Caroline would ruin any future relationship Mike had. While Susan and Mike arrived home that night, they did not communicate verbally. Instead, they continued to communicate through text message. Susan informed Mike that she was filing for a divorce and leaving the next morning. At approximately 10:13 p.m., Susan sent Mike one final text. It addressed his serious boundary issues with his daughter. According to Susan, she was alone in the guest room when Mike suddenly entered and jumped on top of her. Susan felt pressure in her upper abdomen and saw a knife in her husband's hand. She asked him whether he stabbed her, to which he admitted he had done so. Susan alleged that Mike told her that they were not getting a divorce and described a tense, violent struggle, during which her left thumb was sliced. She claimed that Mike stabbed her multiple times and slashed at her wrists. During the altercation, Susan sustained severe injuries. She testified that her blood loss was substantial, causing her to vomit and lose control of her muscles and bodily functions. Mike allegedly told Susan that he was going to lay with her until she died. Susan claimed that she was trying to stay conscious when Mike came up with the idea that an intruder had come in and attacked her. However, Mike's version of events differed greatly. Mike testified that he walked into the bedroom and found Susan on the bed holding a knife. A struggle ensued over the knife, and as they fell onto the bed, the knife fatally wounded Susan's stomach. However, Mike failed to explain how Susan was also stabbed in the neck and thumb. During the testimony, Mike claimed that he intended to call 911 for help after accidentally injuring Susan during a struggle. However, Susan allegedly told him not to do so, as she feared being arrested again for domestic violence. According to Mike, the two of them lay together as she bled for several hours. While they lay there, they had what Mike described as one of the best conversations of their lives. During the conversation, Susan and Mike discussed their future travel plans. They talked about their dream of visiting Germany, Tuscany, Florence, and Greece, and going on a river cruise. According to the prosecution, if Mike was telling the truth, he and Susan were having this conversation on a bed covered in blood, vomit, and human waste and excrement. Mike testified at 3 a.m. that he and Susan's dog, Susie, walked into their bloody bedroom, prompting him to get out of bed to take care of her. However, during this encounter, Susan grabbed the knife and slit her wrists, purportedly stating that she feared going to jail. He claimed to have told Susan that he was not going to get her arrested, but instead decided to lie to the police and stated that he would protect her. As a part of this plan, Mike turned off the security cameras to stage a break-in at around 5:25 a.m. However, he later called 911 and turned the cameras back on. The prosecution argued that Mike's actions indicated an intent to harm Susan. They contended that his willingness to lie about the events and his manipulation of the surveillance cameras suggested that he was attempting to cover up his involvement in the crime. On the other hand, the defense argued that Mike's actions were motivated by his desire to protect his wife. They contended that Susan's attempted suicide was a result of her mental health issues, and that Mike was trying to save her from herself when he turned off the camera and lied to the police. A bloodstain pattern analyst testified on Mike's defense, stating that he had reviewed the medical records that supported Mike's story. According to the analyst, if Susan's wrist had been cut around 10 p.m., as she claimed, she would have died due to blood loss. However, if Mike's story were true, it would have made more sense that she had survived the attack, as medical help had arrived shortly afterwards. The prosecution refuted Mike's claims that he wanted to reconcile his marriage with Susan. They presented evidence that Mike had visited 3 dating sites, seemingly indicating a lack of interest in his reconciliation. However, Mike's defense countered by showing that Mike had accessed several web pages dedicated to battered husbands. After a 9-day trial, the jury went into deliberations 4 hours later. They finally returned with a verdict, finding Mike guilty of attempted first-degree murder and additional charges. In December 2019, Mike was sentenced. However, Susan did not attend the hearing. Mike's daughter, Caroline, addressed the court and expressed her pride in being her father's daughter. She mentioned that Mike had been compassionate and selfless over the years, always putting others before himself. Several friends also stepped forward to share their thoughts on Mike, describing him as a kind, gentle person and a stand-up gentleman. Despite the prosecution's request for a 50-year sentence, the judge ultimately sentenced Mike to 30 years. However, given his age at the time of the sentencing, it is likely that Mike will die in prison. Megan Varikis was born and raised in Pittsburgh in a solid, loving family. Her parents were married for over 30 years, and Megan wanted to love like theirs one day. When Megan was in her 20s, she married. but unfortunately she and her husband drifted apart and divorced. This experience left Megan disillusioned and unwilling to embark on a new relationship. However, fate had a different plan for her. In the winter of 2014, Leon checked into a hotel downtown Pittsburgh, where Megan worked as a manager. Initially, she was not impressed by Leon's arrogance and apparent disregard for others. However, Leon's charm and persuasive tactics eventually wore down Megan's defenses. Against her better judgment, Megan decided to give Leon a chance. They started dating. Leon showered Megan with attention and affection, and she found herself falling for him. From an affluent and wealthy family, Leon attended an elite boarding school as a boy and teenager. He later became a transplant surgeon and achieved great success in his career. Like Megan, Leon faced challenges in his love life, as he was in the midst of a divorce when they first met in 2014. However, as Megan and Leon's relationship progressed, their connection deepened, and they discovered mutual attraction. Leon made Megan believe that she deserved the best that life had to offer. Eventually, Leon made the decision to move back to his hometown of Houston and asked Megan if she would be willing to accompany him. Although she loved her life in Pittsburgh, Megan was ready for this change and eager to take the next step in her relationship with Leon. Upon her arrival in Houston, Megan began looking for a job and found it working as a sales agent in a local hotel. The experience allowed her to explore a new city and develop her independence. Megan rented an apartment in Houston after she and Leon relocated there. Leon moved in with her, and shortly after, they opened a joint bank account. This step was significant for Megan. It made her feel their relationship was moving quickly. As a self-reliant woman, she initially struggled with sharing finances with someone. However, a part of her saw this as a sign of Leon's care and potential future for the two of them as a couple. When Megan met Leon's family, they instantly hit it off. Megan found herself envisioning Leon as her future husband. Despite living far away from her family and friends in Pittsburgh, Megan thrived in Houston. She made new friends and adopted a dog, which brought joy to her life. Online, Megan and Leon projected an image of the perfect relationship. They shared photos of their adventures, romantic dinners, and moments of happiness. However, what was seemingly perfect on the outside began to reveal cracks on the inside. Leon found himself unable to practice medicine in Texas as he did not have the license to do so. This setback significantly hindered his career aspirations as a transplant surgeon. Leon felt undervalued and discouraged by the perceived demotion from being a surgeon to a mere surgeon's assistant. He refused to accept the role, finding it beneath his acquired skills and knowledge. As time went on, the strain caused by Leon's inability to practice medicine began to take a toll on their relationship. Megan, who had sacrificed her independence for the relationship, found herself feeling disillusioned and misunderstood. The cracks in their relationship grew deeper, and it became clear that their paths were diverging. While Megan still clung to hope for their shared future, Leon's unwavering dissatisfaction with his current situation made it increasingly difficult to reconcile their differences. Instead of actively looking for a job, Leon chose to rely on Megan's income to support their household. This burden placed immense pressure on Megan. With the added responsibility of breadwinner, Megan's frustration began to mount. She felt a growing resentment towards Leon as she realized she was shouldering most of the financial burden. The constant pressure of being the responsible one in the relationship took a toll on her mental and emotional well-being. In a moment of frustration and anger, Megan expressed her frustrations with Leon in front of his family. This impulsive decision turned out to be a misstep, as it only heightened tensions within the couple's relationship. Upon returning to their apartment, Leon's anger escalated, resulting in an outburst of violence that left Megan in a state of shock. Leon's violent behavior reached its peak when he tore through Megan's closet and hurled all of her clothing items off the balcony. This act of destruction left Megan feeling violated and helpless. She was unable to comprehend the situation. Over time, Leon's anger towards Megan escalated from verbal insults to physical abuse. He exhibited a pattern of behavior that included throwing the glass bottle he used to spit tobacco at Megan, humiliating her and calling her awful, demeaning names. The abuse seemed to be becoming more and more frequent, leaving Megan in a constant state of fear and anxiety. Despite the abusive behavior, Leon often expressed remorse and professed his love for Megan. He would claim that she was the only thing that brought him happiness and that he was sorry for his actions. However, these apologies were short-lived, and the cycle of abuse continued to repeat itself, leaving Megan feeling trapped and alone. On January 12, 2017, Megan returned home after a long day of work at the hotel to find Leon in a bad mood. Frustrated by some unknown reason, Leon threw a glass of wine at Megan. After enduring years of abuse, Megan had reached her breaking point. she decided to confront Leon and put an end to the toxic relationship. Megan, done with the cycle of abuse, approached Leon and told him that she was leaving him. Determined to make her escape, she packed her bag and prepared to leave. However, Leon was not about to let her go without a fight. As Megan started to walk away with her suitcase in tow, Leon stormed into the bedroom and approached her. With his hands covering her face, he tried to physically restrain her from leaving. Terrified by Leon's behavior, Megan found herself trapped. She knew the situation was escalating and had to make immediate action to escape. In desperation, Megan grabbed her dog and rushed out of the bedroom. Leon pursued her as she ran down the driveway, pulling on the car door to stop her. With determination, Megan closed the door and escaped into the vehicle. As Megan tried to drive away, Leon continued to chase her, determined to prevent her from leaving. Frustrated and angry, he threatened to break the window of the car if she didn't open it. Terrified for her safety, Megan refused to comply and continued to drive away, putting as much distance between herself and her abuser as possible. The following day, as Megan reported to work at the hotel, it was evident that she had been crying. Her concerned friends and coworkers noticed the change in her demeanor and approached her seeking answers. When prodded, she broke down into tears and spoke about the abuse she had been experiencing at Leon's hands. Megan's friends and coworkers were shocked to hear the truth about her situation. Throughout the day, Leon kept contacting Megan through various means, sending her erratic messages. In some of the messages, he would profess his love and express his remorse, indicating his desire to propose. However, Leon would abruptly declare that he was done with her in others. As the day progressed, Megan grew tired of Leon's constant badgering and requested that he leave her alone. However, to her dismay, she discovered that he had drained their bank account. Upon returning home to their shattered apartment, Megan was horrified to discover all her furniture was gone. Fortunately, she had managed to reach home before Leon had the chance to dispose of her clothes and personal possessions. Megan quickly headed to the police station to file a report against Leon, accusing him of assault. She also applied for a protective order, but the process took some time. Several days later, as Megan was leaving her apartment for work, she glanced in her rearview mirror and saw Leon behind her. Panic-stricken, she sped through the city trying to lose him. However, Leon was determined to keep following her. He cut Megan off, forcing her to stop abruptly. Leon got out of his car, and as he approached Megan, telling her she was making a mistake for leaving him, she swerved her car and managed to escape. Leon's actions were so disruptive that the hotel she worked at banned him from the property. However, Leon's determination to pursue Megan led him to lurk outside the building, causing unease among her colleagues and friends. One of Megan's friends took it upon themselves to confront Leon, chasing him across the street and yelling at him to leave Megan alone. The harassment continued, and Leon's persistence ultimately led to his arrest for assault. However, he was out of jail the very next day. Despite legal consequences, Leon's behavior did not deter him. Megan was forced to appear in court 2 weeks after his arrest with Leon. During this court appearance, the judge granted Megan an order of protection against Leon. Valerie McDaniel, a successful veterinarian in Houston, was sitting in the gallery, observing Leon's court appearance. After 19 years of marriage, she was divorced from her husband, Mac. Megan and Valerie had always been friendly with one another, but their bond deepened when Valerie was going through a difficult time in her divorce from Mac. Over bottles of wine and martinis, Valerie confided in Megan, and the two formed a strong connection. After Megan found out Valerie was on Leon's side in the court, she was completely stunned. What shocked Megan even further was the discovery that Valerie had played a role in posting Leon's bail. According to the bail bondsman, Leon had asked for his assistance in securing another client named Zach. He informed the bail bondsman that he had given Zach a significant amount of money to handle a problem. Leon's exact words were, "She's got to be out of the picture. I can't have her come to court and testify against me." The bail bondsman found Leon's words to be scary, as they raised suspicions about the possibility of Leon hiring someone named Zach to murder a witness in a case against Leon. Given his close friendship with the local city council person and the Houston police chief, he decided to reach out to them and share his concerns. By the end of February 2017, Megan finally felt a sense of safety, having left Leon behind and obtained a protective order. However, this sense of security was short-lived, as she was contacted by a detective who informed her about a credible threat to her life. Unsure of what to make of this information, Megan met with the detectives the following day, wearing a wig, hat, and sunglasses as a precaution. The detectives informed her about the tip they had received, informing her that they needed to surround her with police until the threat against her was taken care of. They advised her to go to Pittsburgh for safety. Megan packed a bag and left Texas right away. The detectives with the Harris County District Attorney's Special Crimes Bureau were tasked with the investigation of Leon Jacob. and the alleged murder-for-hire plot. As they delved deeper into the case, they discovered a surprising fact about Leon. He was a doctor. This revelation surprised the detectives, as professionals such as doctors are not usually seen involved in criminal activities. While searching for the person Leon had mentioned working alongside him, the detectives were able to uncover Zach's identity. However, what they found was that Zach was Motaz Azah, or Taz for short. After interviewing Taz, the detectives discovered he was not a hitman, but knew Leon. Taz admitted Leon had approached him with a request to eliminate his ex-girlfriend, Megan. However, Taz clarified that he had never intended to harm Megan and merely sought the financial gain that came with the job. Taz divulged to the detectives that Leon had been in frequent contact with him, as Leon was still insistent on having the job completed. The detectives then approached Taz with an offer to work with them to capture Leon, and Taz agreed to aid in the effort. With Taz's cooperation, the detectives were closer to bringing Leon to justice. Their efforts were focused on apprehending Leon and preventing any danger to Megan, while also ensuring the safety of everyone involved in the investigation. Leon and Valerie met Taz several days later at a local Olive Garden. They were accompanied by a man named Adam, who was introduced to them as a potential hitman. Little did Leon and Valerie know that Adam was actually an undercover police officer. During their conversation, Leon mentioned some ideas about how to take out his ex-girlfriend Megan. One of his suggestions was to have the hitman give her a lethal injection of potassium chloride, which would stop her heart. Leon believed this method would be untraceable, making it less likely that the police would suspect foul play. Leon also divulged that Valerie, a veterinarian, had access to this drug through her clinic and suggested that Valerie could provide it to the hitman, making it easier for him to carry out his plan. Leon made it clear that Megan was not the only person he wanted out of the picture. He had additional targets in mind and seemed eager to involve Taz and Adam in his schemes. According to Leon, Valerie's ex-husband Mac was the worst person he had ever met. Leon expressed his desire to eliminate Mac as well. Valerie approached Adam, the undercover officer, and confided in him about her situation. She told him Mac was planning to take her daughter away. Detectives working on the case approached Megan and Mac and asked them to participate in a fake abduction and murder. Their objective was to create a staged crime scene and take photos so the undercover officer could show Leon and Valerie. Reluctantly, Megan and Mac agreed to cooperate. In order to make Mac appear as though he had been executed inside his car, the detectives covered him in pig's blood. Recognizing Leon's profession as a doctor, the detectives took extra measure to ensure Mac's appearance was as convincing as possible. They carefully staged his scenario to make it appear as if he had suffered a fatal gunshot wound to the head. Meanwhile, the detectives opted for a kidnapping scenario for Megan's situation. They zip-tied her hands and feet, securing her tightly, and covered her mouth with duct tape. Throughout this process, Megan became increasingly panicked and cried, realizing the man she intended to spend her life with had paid someone to murder her. The staged situation became all too real for her, as she realized she was now a pawn in the detectives' plan to catch Leon and get him arrested. After the staged photos, Adam, the undercover officer, texted and called Leon to inform him that he had taken care of Mac. He then proceeded to show Leon the images he had captured. The undercover officer then revealed that Megan had been kidnapped, but unfortunately, there was no reason with her. Further, the undercover officer expressed that Megan was unwilling to leave the state and stop pursuing charges against Leon. As a result, the undercover officer concluded that he would have to kill her in order to resolve the situation. Several hours later, the police arrived at Valerie's apartment with their body cam footage rolling. The officers informed Valerie, who was there with Leon, that they were there to tell her that her ex-husband Mac had been killed. However, the officers knew it was all part of a ruse and Mac was safe. After the officers told Valerie and Leon the news, they tried to feign surprise. Without prompting, Leon said he and Valerie had been home with Valerie's daughter all day, providing an alibi even though no one questioned him. Leon's statement seemed rehearsed and suspicious. Leon and Valerie were arrested for solicitation to commit capital murder. The officers who arrested the couple revealed that Mac and Megan had not been killed and were both alive and well. Leon pleaded not guilty. 3 days after Valerie was arrested, she was released on a $50,000 bond. Many of Valerie's friends believed that she would never have ordered a hit on her ex-husband if Leon Jacob had not influenced her. According to her friends, she wanted love and attention, and Leon used his predatory ways to brainwash her. Valerie's friends believed Leon manipulated and used her for his own gain. They thought Leon's power and control over Valerie led her to commit the crime she was arrested for. Valerie's friends described her as a loving and caring person who was always willing to help others. Her loved ones expressed shock at the idea that she would do anything to harm her ex-husband or his loved ones. They said that Valerie's desire for love and attention blinded her to the consequences of her actions. According to Valerie's friends, Leon was a controlling and manipulative individual. Valerie's friends said he often used his charm and charisma to get what he wanted, including manipulating those around him. They believed that Leon was controlling Valerie's emotions and actions to ensure he got what he wanted. 2 weeks after Valerie's release on bail, she took her life by jumping off the balcony of her 7th-floor apartment. She was due to appear in court the following day. Before Valerie took her life, she recorded a video on her iPad, telling her side of the story regarding the murder-for-hire plot that led to her arrest. In the recordings, Valerie asserted that the police entrapped her and that she had never intended to harm Mac, her ex-boyfriend, and the father of her daughter. As the news of Valerie's death spread, her loved ones were shocked. When Leon, her incarcerated lover, learned about her death, his attorneys stated that he was devastated. Leon viewed Valerie as a wife and had asked the judge to allow him to attend her funeral. However, his request was denied. In 2018, Leon Jacob went on trial for solicitation to commit capital murder. The defense argued that Leon did not mean to hire a hitman to murder Megan, but rather hired a private investigator to help the couple reunite. They claimed that Leon was not attempting to harm her. However, the prosecution refuted Leon's claims and presented recordings to the jury where he suggested killing Megan with an injection of potassium chloride. Additionally, graphic staged crime scene photos depicting Megan and Mac as would-be victims were shown in court. Ultimately, Leon was found guilty of 2 counts of solicitation to commit capital murder. He was sentenced to life in prison and ordered to pay a fine of $10,000. Toni Barillette was the only girl born in the middle of 2 brothers. Growing up as the only girl, Toni was a tomboy, but also the perfect Southern belle. Her upbringing as the only girl in a household of boys made her independent and assertive. She could hold her own in male-dominated environments, but also exuded femininity and charm. After graduating high school, Toni pursued higher education, enrolling in college and medical school. She was a dedicated student who excelled in her studies. Toni's hard work paid off as she graduated top of her class. Throughout her life, Toni focused on her career goals as an ophthalmologist. She became a successful and respected field doctor known for her expertise and compassion. Despite her professional achievements, Toni still yearned for love and companionship. Toni married at a young age, but found that their relationship lacked chemistry and compatibility. The divorce was a difficult adjustment for Toni, as she struggled with disappointment and loneliness, using it as a distraction from the pain she felt. Over time, Toni realized it was time to give love another chance. At 30, she decided to dip her toes back into the dating pool. However, her previous experience had left her guarded and cautious. Despite her initial resistance, Toni eventually found herself opening up to the possibility of love. She allowed herself to meet new people and explore potential relationships. However, it was still not easy for her to let go of the past and embrace the idea of finding true love. Like many others, Toni believed that online dating held the key to finding her soulmate. With a strong belief in the importance of faith in her life, Toni decided to embark on a quest to find a partner who shared her beliefs. As a result, she turned to a Christian dating site. Throughout her online dating journey, Toni went on several dates with men who captured her interest. However, she found herself struggling to find that special someone who truly connected with her on a deeper level. Despite the potential connections, Toni remained hopeful that one day she would meet the love of her life. When all hope seemed lost, Toni encountered Harold Henthorn, a charming and handsome man who piqued her interest. Harold's dating profile painted a picture of a confident and successful man living in Colorado. According to his profile, he worked as a consultant at a nonprofit organization. What attracted Toni to Harold the most was his genuine and heartfelt desire to find a second chance at love. He disclosed to Toni that he was a widower, having lost his first wife, Lynn, in a car accident. Harold shared with Toni that he had waited for a significant amount of time to find his happily ever after. As their online conversations continued, Harold decided to travel to Jackson, Mississippi to meet Toni in person. Upon being introduced to Toni's friends, Harold effortlessly won them over with his charismatic personality and genuine warmth. Toni's loved ones quickly realized Harold was the perfect match for their beloved friend. They noticed his outgoing nature and energy complemented Toni's reserved and quiet demeanor. From the moment she met Harold, she knew she had found her soulmate. Their relationship moved quickly, and by Valentine's Day 2000, Harold proposed to Toni with a stunning ring. Of course, Toni said yes, thrilled to have the opportunity to embark on the next chapter of her life with her Prince Charming. Less than a year after they first met, On September 30th, 2000, Tony and Harold exchanged vows in a grand church wedding in Jackson, Mississippi. Following the wedding, Tony and Harold relocated to Colorado, where Harold lived. Tony quickly established herself as an esteemed ophthalmologist, treating her patients like family. She had remarkable bedside manner, ensuring every patient felt heard, understood, and cared for. Her compassion and dedication to her craft made her an exceptional doctor. Tony's life revolved around her career as a doctor and her relationship with Harold. Together, they built a beautiful home and supported each other. As time passed, Tony and Harold had a daughter, Haley, who was the light of their lives. Years passed, and Tony Henthorne and her husband Harold built a beautiful life together. Just 2 weeks before Tony and Harold's anniversary, Harold reached out to the office manager at her ophthalmology practice. The manager was eager to help. Harold requested that the office manager prepare a surprise for his wife, saying he wanted to take her to the Rocky Mountain National Park. Harold planned to take Tony away for the weekend and celebrate their 12th wedding anniversary. Knowing how much Tony loved their job and patients, the office manager kept Tony's schedule clear. On September 28, 2012, Harold arrived at Tony's office. The manager brought Tony into an exam room, thinking she would treat a regular patient. However, when Tony stepped inside, she was shocked to see her husband Harold waiting for her. Harold told Tony that he had a surprise for her. They were going away for the weekend. He assured Tony that he had already made arrangements to have a babysitter for their young daughter Haley and packed her bag. Tony, always trusting and unsuspecting, happily agreed to the unexpected trip. As the couple embarked on their journey, Harold informed Tony that they would spend the first night at the Stanley Hotel in Estes Park, Colorado, the inspiration for Stephen King's novel The Shining. Upon arrival at the Stanley, Harold and Tony had an early dinner and retired to their room. Harold had meticulously mapped out trails in the park for them to explore the following day. On September 29, 2012, the couple decided to embark on a trek through the picturesque Rocky Mountain National Park. The day started peacefully as Tony and Harold set out on their hike. They were excited about the breathtaking views and the prospect of a beautiful day in nature. America's national parks are known for their breathtaking landscapes and awe-inspiring beauty. However, as beautiful as these parks may be, they also hold a hidden danger. According to a study conducted by Backpacker magazine, a staggering 243 people die in national parks each year. This statistic highlights the inherent risks that come with exploring the wilderness. In Rocky Mountains National Park, where the Henthornes were planning their hike, the leading cause of death was falling. As the hours passed, the couple ventured deep into the rocky terrain. A bit before 7 p.m., Harold made a shocking call to 911. In a panicked voice, he explained to the dispatchers that Tony had fallen off the edge of a cliff and was in critical condition. The dispatcher immediately dispatched a park ranger, a trained EMT, to the scene. However, due to the treacherous terrain, the ranger needed to walk to the spot where Harold was. Harold waited on the phone with the dispatcher, his voice filled with urgency. He begged the dispatcher to send a helicopter to rescue his wife. Due to the high altitude and terrain, the dispatcher explained that a helicopter could not reach where he was. The dispatcher tried to reassure Harold that help was on the way, but Harold's desperation and fear were palpable. After a while, Harold hung up the phone on the dispatcher. He said that he feared that his cell phone battery would die, leaving him without a way to connect to the emergency services. As the ranger ventured through the park, the sun began to set, casting an eerie glow over the landscape. In order to make it easier for the ranger to locate him, Harold decided to start a fire. Approximately an hour after the initial call, Harold contacted the emergency services again. This time, the dispatcher attempted to guide Harold through CPR, hoping to save Tony's life. However, Harold insisted on hanging up with the dispatcher, stating that he needed to hang up the line in order to keep it free. As the ranger continued his search, the dispatcher called once more and requested Harold use his whistle so the ranger could find him. Harold blew the whistle, signaling to the ranger that he was nearby. Unfortunately, it was too late by the time the ranger and emergency services arrived. It was over 2 hours after Harold first reported Tony's fall, and Tony had already passed away. All deaths in national parks are thoroughly investigated. This case was no exception. Harold recounted to the ranger the details of the hike that led to Tony's tragic death. He stated that at 1:45 p.m., he and Tony embarked on the Deer Mountain Trail, where they decided to take a selfie. However, the trail was crowded with numerous hikers, prompting them to venture further into the woods. Harold explained that they reached their destination around 3:30 p.m. and had lunch on the mountain. During this time, he captured a photo of Tony. However, the ridge where they had stopped for lunch was too noisy for the couple to enjoy a peaceful meal. As a result, they decided to continue down the mountain in search of a secluded spot. Harold mentioned that Tony had spotted wild turkeys and wanted to get closer for a photo opportunity. Unfortunately, she fell 128 feet down the mountain while trying to capture the birds. When Harold returned home after Tony's passing, he was met with an outpouring of support from his family and friends. His daughter Haley, who was deeply affected by her mother's loss, also received a lot of love and care from everyone around her. However, amidst this outpouring of sympathy, there were whispers and rumors surrounding Toni's sudden death. Toni's friends found it peculiar that she died only 1 year after she almost lost her life in another incident. While Toni was cleaning underneath her deck 1 year earlier, Harold accidentally hit a loose beam, causing it to crash onto Toni's head. She was rushed to the hospital, but fortunately, she survived the injury. However, she was left with bruises and injuries that took some time to heal. In light of these circumstances, Toni's friends couldn't help but wonder if foul play was involved. They couldn't help but question if the accident a year earlier was accidental, or if there was more to the story. Suspicions heightened when, on the day of the funeral service, Harold seemed more interested in watching a football game rather than mourning the loss of his wife with their loved ones. The FBI became actively involved in the investigation into Toni's death. Agents with the FBI conducted interviews with the ranger who first arrived at the scene on the day Toni died. According to the ranger, there was no indication that Harold had attempted to perform CPR on his dying wife. Further investigation by the FBI uncovered additional evidence suggesting that Harold may have been involved in Toni's death. The investigators discovered that before Toni died, Harold's cell phone pinged in the area where she fell 9 times. These pings raised suspicion that the phone calls may have been part of a scouting mission to locate the ideal location to kill his wife. It wasn't long before the FBI received a call informing them that Toni was not Harold's first wife to die. This information raised suspicions about Harold's involvement in the death of his previous wife and Toni. Lynn and Harold were married in September 1982 and lived in Colorado. On May 6, 1995, a little after 9 p.m., in the countryside of Colorado, a woman and her family were driving on Highway 67 when they saw a man in the street flagging down cars for help. It was Harold Henthorn. Harold seemed panicky and quickly approached the woman's vehicle and told them he needed their assistance. He explained that his wife, Lynn, was stuck underneath their car and was in need of help. Harold claimed that while he and his wife were fixing a flat tire, a jack gave way, trapping Lynn beneath the car. The woman and her family sprang into action, working together to lift the car off Lynn. As they did so, they noticed that her lips were blue and she was not breathing. It was a chilling sight made worse by the chilly weather. Lynn, who was only wearing a tank top and jeans, was exposed to the elements and in desperate need of warmth. Recognizing the gravity of the situation, the woman and her family took an immediate action. They began piling their coats on Lynn, hoping to keep her body temperature elevated and comfort her. Since it was the mid-1990s, there would have been no cell phones on the scene. After driving 2 miles, the woman who stopped to help Harold managed to find a house with a phone. She hurriedly made a call, alerting emergency services to the dire situation. The dispatcher assured her that help was on the way, but time was of the essence. When the police officers and paramedics arrived at the scene, they administered a shot of epinephrine in an attempt to restart Lynn's heart. Fortunately, their efforts were successful, and Lynn's heart began to beat once again. She was then transported to a nearby hospital for further medical attention. Unfortunately, despite the initial progress, Lynn passed away at the age of 37. As Lynn was being treated, one of the EMTs attempted to gather information from Harold. However, Harold appeared evasive in his answers and continually moved away from the medic, hindering their efforts to gain the necessary information. The medic noticed that Harold's behavior seemed strange, as he did not feel urgent or desperate for his wife to receive assistance. From observing Harold's actions, the medic came to the conclusion that Harold's demeanor did not seem consistent with someone deeply concerned about his wife's well-being. It seemed as if Harold was reluctant to allow any assistance to reach her. This behavior raised suspicions and made the medic question Harold's intentions. When the medics were able to restart Lynn's heart, Harold acted shocked, maybe even disappointed. Despite freezing outside, Harold did not remove his jacket and place it on his injured wife. This behavior puzzled the medic, as they expected him to prioritize his wife's comfort. However, the onlookers at the scene seemed more interested in helping Lynn than her husband. This discrepancy furthered the medic's confusion. An autopsy was conducted on Lynn's body, and it was discovered that she had died from asphyxiation. This finding prompted an investigation into her untimely death. However, a few days later, the medical examiner ruled her death accidental and closed the case. At the time, no one had any reason to suspect that Lynn's death was not as straightforward as it seemed. The case appeared closed, and it seemed no foul play was involved. Detectives investigating Toni's death in 2012 hired a private investigator to look into Lynn's death several years earlier. The private investigator's investigation revealed that Harold provided various accounts regarding the cause of Lynn's entrapment under the car. To some people, Harold stated that Lynn was searching for a lug nut at the time of the accident. However, to others, he claimed she went under the car to retrieve a flashlight she had accidentally dropped. Furthermore, Harold's accounts differed regarding where they were headed when the incident occurred. In some cases, he claimed they were about to head out for dinner, while in others, he stated that they had already eaten and were on their way home. Over the years, the private investigator discovered that Harold had also told different stories regarding Lynn's death. Harold told one person that the trunk of the car fell on Lynn's neck, breaking it and killing her, and told people at his church his first wife died of cancer. One of the detectives approached one of Harold's first wife's, Lynn's best friend, with a proposition. They asked if she would be willing to wear a wire and approach Harold to obtain incriminating information. Initially, the friend was hesitant to agree to the request, as she believed Harold was innocent. They had been friends for many years, and she trusted his character. However, the friend decided to take the matter to her pastor to seek guidance. The pastor advised her that if Harold was truly innocent, her involvement could prove it. This realization weighed heavily on the friend's mind, and she decided to reconsider her initial refusal. After careful consideration, the friend eventually agreed to meet with Harold and wear a wire during their conversation. However, during the meeting, a technical glitch occurred in the wiring system, causing disruptions in the recording. The friend realized that she needed to take action discreetly. She discreetly excused herself from the conversation and made her way to the bathroom, where an officer was waiting to assist her. The friend observed that Harold never explicitly denied killing his first wife, Lynn, or his second wife, Toni. However, Harold never admitted to the killings either. Despite the lack of a confession, the friend did not believe that Harold was capable of murder. Over time, however, the friend's perspective began to change. She began to suspect that neither of Harold's wives had died accidentally. As the investigation into Toni's death progressed, the FBI learned that Harold had presented himself as a fundraiser for nonprofit organizations. He had claimed that he regularly went on business trips, insisting that these trips were integral to his work. However, upon closer inspection, the agents discovered none of these claims were true. They were unable to locate any tax returns, pay stubs, or any other evidence that Harold had a job since 1995. Further investigation revealed that Harold's weekly business trips were spent at a local Panera Bread outlet. The agents discovered his location through surveillance footage, which showed him surfing the internet during his supposed work trips. This revelation cast doubt on Harold's credibility and raised suspicion about his activities. On November 6, 2014, 2 years after the death of Toni in Rocky Mountain National Park, Harold was arrested and charged with Toni's murder. Harold pleaded not guilty to the charges against him. Toni's family sought custody of Haley, Toni's daughter, but Harold, who was in jail at the time, refused to allow it. As a result, Haley was placed in the care of her godparents in Colorado for the time being. 10 months after Harold was arrested, he went on trial in 2015 for the murder of his second wife, Toni. Despite the absence of forensic evidence linking him to her death, the prosecution presented various pieces of evidence to strengthen their case. Firstly, the prosecution presented evidence that Harold had taken out several life insurance policies on Toni. This, they argued, suggested premeditation on his part, as he had planned to kill his wife and profit from her death. Furthermore, the prosecution presented evidence of pings in the area several weeks prior to Toni's death. These pings suggested that Harold was actively seeking a location where he could carry out his sinister plan without attracting attention. Additionally, the prosecution presented a map found in Harold's car, marked with a giant X on the spot where Toni fell from the cliff. This, they claimed, further solidified their theory that Harold had selected this location in order to carry out his nefarious plan. However, the most compelling evidence presented by the prosecution was the death of Harold's first wife, Lynn, and the suspicions surrounding it. The similarities between Lynn's death and Toni's, according to prosecution, were striking. The jury believed that Harold exhibited a pattern of behavior that led them to convict him. After a 10-day trial, the jury retired for deliberation. The jury ultimately returned with a guilty verdict, finding Harold guilty of murdering his second wife, Toni. They found that there was a pattern of similarities between the deaths of Lynn and Toni, which led them to believe that Harold was responsible. As a result, Harold was sentenced to life in prison, where he will reside for the rest of his natural life. Although Harold was never formally charged with the murder of his first wife, Lynn, it is widely accepted that he is also responsible for her death. In December 2015, Toni's oldest brother was granted custody of her and Harold's daughter, Haley. In 2023, Harold Henthorne appealed his conviction, but it was ultimately dismissed. Additionally, he filed a motion for post-conviction relief, alleging ineffective assistance by his defense attorney. Harold contended that his attorney's performance during the trial failed to meet constitutional standards. He argued that his defense attorney did not prepare an adequate defense for him. However, Harold's request for relief was also denied. Despite his claim of inadequate representation, the court determined that his defense attorney had provided an adequate defense, meeting the constitutional standards required for a fair trial. Harold's story is a stark reminder of the dangers posed by people whom society label as charming or grooming. His ability to charm and deceive those around him highlights the importance of being vigilant and suspicious when dating or entering into a relationship with someone. This case serves as a cautionary tale for individuals who find themselves in similar situations. It encourages them to exercise caution and seek support from trusted individuals. Harold Henthorne's chilling story reminds us of the consequences of falling victim to manipulation and the destructive power of greed. Mike Williams' disappearance on Lake Seminole left the nation in shock and bewilderment. The mysterious circumstances surrounding his disappearance had remained unsolved for years, leaving no clues or leads as to what had happened. With no leads or clues, the case seemed destined to remain unsolved indefinitely. However, the truth was finally revealed in a shocking turn of events, leaving everyone in disbelief. Mike Williams was a man who was full of life and destined for great things. Born Jerry Michael Williams, but known as Michael or Mike, he grew up north of Tallahassee, Florida. His parents sacrificed a great deal to ensure that he and his brother had the opportunity to attend North Florida Christian High School, an elite private school. While in high school, Mike flourished. He was actively involved in the student council and played football. During this time, Mike developed a deep passion for duck hunting. Through this interest, he met his lifelong best friend, Brian Winchester. Another person who entered Mike's life in high school was Denise Morell. Denise would tell people she knew she wanted to marry him from the moment they met. Their relationship blossomed, and they became inseparable. After graduating high school, Mike continued his education at Florida State University, where he majored in political science and urban planning. Despite his academic pursuits, Mike always made time for Denise. Their love for each other only grew stronger with each passing day. Mike embarked on a successful professional journey. An appraisal group hired him as a property appraiser. The company's owners praised Mike for his hard work and dedication, stating he was the hardest working man they had ever met. On December 17, 1994, Mike married his high school sweetheart, Denise Morell, in a beautiful wedding ceremony. 4 years later, Mike and Denise welcomed their daughter into the world. Mike was an incredibly devoted father obsessed with his baby girl. As the years passed, Mike began looking forward to the future. He told his mother and brother that he and Denise wanted to expand their family. Mike and Denise had big plans to vacation in Hawaii, travel to Jamaica for work, and build a strong foundation for their growing family. But on December 16, 2000, everything changed. Mike went duck hunting on Lake Seminole and never returned home. On December 16, 2000, 31-year-old Mike Williams left his home around 3 a.m. to embark on a routine duck hunting expedition. Lake Seminole, located in northwest Tallahassee, Florida, is a vast reservoir formed by the Apalachicola River. The reservoir serves as a popular spot for hunters. Mike's wife Denise anxiously awaited his return, as the couple planned to celebrate their anniversary in Apalachicola that night. When Mike still hadn't returned by noon that day, Denise reached out to their friends and family members to see if they had any information regarding his whereabouts. One of Mike's closest friends, Brian Winchester, along with Brian's father, decided to visit the area where Mike was known to go duck hunting. Together they located Mike's Ford Bronco near a remote boat launch on Lake Seminole, but there was no sign of Mike. Alarmed by the lack of any clues or signs, Mike's loved ones contacted the Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission, the WFC. WFC officers sprang into action, deploying a helicopter to circle the 30,000-acre lake in search of Mike or his boat. Unfortunately, there was no sign of him anywhere. As time passed, speculation grew among Mike's loved ones. They wondered if he had somehow fallen out of his boat, if it had hit one of the tree stumps in the lake and trapped him beneath the vegetation in the water. This scenario seemed plausible, as the water in Lake Seminole is shallow and dotted with numerous tree stumps, making it a potential hazard for boaters. One day after Mike's disappearance, on December 17th, his best friend Brian made a shocking discovery. Brian stumbled upon Mike's boat, located not far from the landing where Mike's car was parked. Inside the boat was Mike's shotgun for hunting, still in the case, his decoys, and life jackets. This discovery raised even more questions about Mike's disappearance. The officers examining the scene noted that Mike had not even started hunting ducks before he vanished. The mysterious disappearance of Mike Williams on Lake Seminole left the community of Tallahassee shocked and worried. Denise, Mike's wife, struggled to cope with the emotional toll of his disappearance. She was consumed by grief and often dissolved into tears when friends came to visit. With each passing day, the hope for Mike's safe return grew dimmer. The holidays approached, and on Christmas Eve, Mike's mother paid a visit to the lake. A flicker of hope ignited as she stood at the boat launch where Brian had found Mike's car. She felt Mike was not lost in the lake, but perhaps still alive. However, FWC officers remained steadfast in their belief that Mike had drowned. They explained that his body would eventually surface, yet it never appeared. 10 days into the search for Mike Williams, a camo-patterned hunting cap was found floating in Lake Seminole. The hat, identified as belonging to Mike, was a significant clue in the case. Mike's best friend Brian verified that the hat was indeed his and provided corroborating evidence in the form of a picture showing Mike wearing the hat. This revelation intensified the belief that Mike was in the lake. However, the discovery of a hunting cap floating in the water brought another disturbing element to the investigation. Despite its beauty, Lake Seminole was teeming with hundreds of alligators. This newfound knowledge raised the question of whether a gator might have pulled Mike into the water and concealed his body beneath a log. While this theory was intriguing, not everyone subscribed to it. Mike's mother, for example, expressed her skepticism. She deeply feared alligators, having witnessed her son's passion for duck hunting. However, Mike had always assured her that he only hunted during cold weather when the alligators were dormant. Despite her apprehension, Mike's mother clung to the belief that her son was still alive. She believed he would have managed to escape if he had encountered an alligator. Her unwavering faith provided her with strength and hope. The ongoing search for Mike continued, with investigators and loved ones hoping for some sign of his whereabouts. As the investigation continued, one question remained in everyone's mind. What happened to Mike Williams? As the months passed, the search gradually subsided. But in June 2001, an angler stumbled upon a pair of waders floating in the lake. This discovery rekindled interest in the investigation and prompted a renewed search for Mike. Divers were called to investigate and search the bottom of the lake. They eventually recovered a lightweight hunting coat and a flashlight, items that belonged to Mike. However, something peculiar about these discoveries was that the wader, jacket, and flashlights showed no signs of having been in the water for an extended period. Additionally, no DNA was recovered from any of the three items, indicating that Mike might not have been wearing them at the time of his disappearance. Despite the lack of evidence, a judge in Tallahassee ruled that Mike was indeed deceased and signed a death certificate listing the cause of death as drowning. Mike's mother, who was left devastated by the loss of her son, had numerous questions regarding her son's belongings that were found in the lake. She felt that someone may have planted these belongings in order to lead them away from the truth about what happened to Mike. However, with Mike declared deceased, the court allowed his wife, Denise, to move forward with claims on Mike's life insurance policies. As a result, Denise received a hefty payout of over $1 million. While everyone else seemed to accept the narrative that Mike had drowned in the lake, his mother refused to believe that this was the case. She was determined to find answers and uncover the truth regarding her son's disappearance. Mike's mother took proactive measures in her search, including posting missing persons flyers of Mike all over Tallahassee, paying for billboards to advertise his disappearance, and carrying around a picket sign with the message, "My son is missing, please help me find him." Despite her efforts, Mike's mother encountered resistance from various authorities. She wrote letters to local and state officials, but they claimed that alligators had devoured Mike's body after he drowned. However, Mike's mother remained steadfast in her belief that there was more to Mike's disappearance than met the eye. Finally, in February 2004, the Florida Department of Law Enforcement, FDLE, opened a case file on Mike's disappearance and assigned a team of detectives to investigate the case. The detectives began by revisiting the initial search efforts and conducting interviews with everyone involved in the initial search. During the investigation, one significant discovery made by the FDLE detectives was the existence of multiple life insurance policies on Mike's life. His best friend and insurance agent, Brian Winchester, drafted one of these policies only weeks before Mike went missing. Furthermore, the detectives noticed that Mike's best friend Brian married Mike's wife, Denise, in September 2004. This development added another layer of suspicion to the case. Many people found this occurrence odd, and rumors began to surface that Denise and Brian could have been involved in Mike's disappearance. Although the detectives were suspicious of Denise and Brian, they were unable to find sufficient evidence to bring charges against them. Despite the lack of viable leads generated by the Florida Department of Law Enforcement, his mother remained steadfast in her advocacy for her son. Her tireless efforts ultimately led to the popular true crime television series Disappeared, dedicating a segment to Mike's case in late 2011. Starting in 2012, Mike's mother began writing one letter a day to then Governor of Florida Rick Scott, pleading with him to have an agency other than the FDLE investigate Mike's disappearance or appoint a special prosecutor. A special prosecutor is an individual or entity appointed to investigate and prosecute a specific case or cases, usually when a conflict of interest arises within the regular prosecutor's office. Mike's mother later detailed her concerns regarding the FDLE's handling of the case and highlighted the need for fresh eyes to uncover the truth. Despite sending nearly 200 letters, Mike's mother never received a response from the governor's office. She later discovered that all the letters she had sent had been forwarded to the FDLE headquarters, where they remained unopened. This discovery enraged Mike's mother, as she felt that no one was taking her concerns seriously or showing any interest in finding her son. In 2011, another lead emerged in the search for Mike Williams. A self-proclaimed psychic and certified forensic psychological profiler reviewed the case and identified a potential location of Mike's body. She gave investigators the coordinates of another boat launch in Wakulla County. Cadaver dogs sniffed the area, but no evidence was found. Despite the lack of evidence, the psychic believed they were moving in the right direction. According to state officials in 2011, the psychic did not find any additional evidence that warranted a further investigation. However, in 2012, Mike's widow, Denise, separated from her then-husband Mike's best friend, Brian Winchester. As Denise and Brian's marriage crumbled, a long-held secret unraveled, shedding light on what happened to Mike on Lake Seminole nearly a decade earlier. Denise filed for divorce from Brian in 2015. The divorce proceedings were difficult, with Denise and Brian expressing frustration and disappointment. However, it was Brian's addiction to sex that ultimately led to the dissolution of their marriage. She said she could no longer tolerate the constant infidelity and sought a divorce to put an end to the turmoil. In August 2016, a full year after filing for divorce, Brian took matters into his own hands. Denise was unaware that Brian had followed her as she drove to work at Florida State University. While on the phone with her sister, Denise caught sight of Brian climbing over the back seat of her car. Panic ensued as she realized she was being kidnapped. Without hesitation, Brian took Denise's phone and ordered her to drive. Denise initially hesitated, not wanting to comply with his demands. However, when Brian brandished a firearm, she quickly realized that she had little option but to drive. Denise complied with the instructions, hoping that the situation would resolve itself. According to Denise, Brian justified his actions by stating he had no choice. He explained that she had ignored his calls and text messages, forcing him to resort to drastic measures. As they continued their journey, Brian directed Denise to drive somewhere else. However, instead of following his usual demands, Denise decided to take matters into her own hands. She pulled into a pharmacy parking lot, knowing it was safe and public. Inside the parking lot, Denise and Brian engaged in a tense conversation. Brian expressed his hopelessness and despair, stating he had nothing to live for if he divorced. He assured Denise that he didn't want to hurt her in any way. Denise listened carefully to Brian's words, trying to console him and understand his state of mind. She assured him that she cared about him and wanted to help him in any way she could. As the conversation continued and Brian calmed down, Denise agreed to drive to where he had left his truck at a nearby park. Upon leaving Denise's car, Brian took a tan sheet, a plastic covering, a spray bleach bottle, and various tools from Denise's vehicle. Despite Brian's claim that he did not intend to harm Denise, Denise felt that he had a different plan in mind for her. Although Denise promised Brian she would not go to the police as soon as he was no longer in her sight, she immediately drove to the sheriff's department. Brian was subsequently arrested and charged with kidnapping, armed burglary, and domestic assault. Denise requested a protective order informing the court that she had feared for her life and her daughters. As a result, Brian was ordered to be held without bond. On December 19, 2017, Brian was sentenced to 20 years in prison and 15 years of probation. Mike Williams' disappearance was a topic that was not addressed during the Brian Winchester hearing in 2017. However, behind the scenes, there were numerous wheels turning as Brian Winchester had made a deal with the detectives 2 months earlier. He agreed to provide information regarding what happened to Mike Williams on December 2000 on Lake Seminole in exchange for immunity from prosecution on charges related to Mike's disappearance. In a recorded interview, Brian told the detectives that he had started an extramarital affair with Denise on October 13, 1997, behind both his and his wife's back. According to Brian, Denise made their intentions clear from the beginning, stating that she would never divorce Mike. The detectives learned that maintaining appearance was of utmost importance for Denise, and a divorce would be a significant blemish on her stellar reputation. However, even though Denise wanted to be with Brian, she refused to leave her marriage with Mike legally. As a result, Brian stated that Denise began discussing the idea of killing Mike and making it appear as an accident. This plan would allow her to continue her relationship with Brian while maintaining her public image. Denise wanted Mike out of the picture and wanted to remove Brian's wife. However, Brian denied having any intention of killing his first wife, the mother of his children. Instead, he filed for divorce. Initially, Brian and Denise concocted a plan to have Mike killed at his office and make it look like a robbery gone wrong. However, they later settled on the idea of arranging a hunting accident. On the day Mike went missing, Brian lured Mike to Lake Seminole. Once they were out on the boat, Brian encouraged Mike to put on his waders. According to Brian, what happened next was a panicked situation. As Mike struggled in the water, attempting to pull himself up onto a tree stump, Brian said he and Mike were in a frenzy. Mike desperately clung to the tree stump, fighting for his life. In a moment of desperation, Brian took Mike's shotgun and shot Mike in the face. Because Brian killed Mike by a gunshot, not drowning, as Brian had planned to kill him, there was no way for Brian to pass Mike's death off as an accident. Brian dragged Mike's body back into the boat. He then loaded Mike's body into his truck and drove to a remote location near a rural lake in Leon County and buried him there. Brian claimed that they had slowed down their affair to avoid raising suspicion. He explained that the reason for his recent imprisonment on kidnapping charges was that he was fearful of Denise disclosing the truth regarding Mike's disappearance after the divorce. Crime scene investigators went out to the spot where Brian indicated he buried Mike's body and found human remains that they matched to Mike Williams. With the help of forensic evidence, investigators were able to confirm that the remains belonged to Mike Williams. This breakthrough in the case provided the family with some closure, as they now knew that Mike was no longer missing, but he had been tragically killed. When Mike's mother found out the truth about what happened to her son, she was stunned to learn that his wife and best friend had had him killed. On May 8, 2018, Denise was arrested while leaving her work after the discovery of Mike's body. She was subsequently charged with first-degree murder and conspiracy to commit murder. Denise pleaded not guilty to the charges. Her trial began on December 10, 2018, and the star witness testifying against her was her ex-husband, Brian Winchester. During Brian's testimony, he spoke in detail about an incident that occurred at the lake where Mike was clinging onto a stump before he was shot and killed. This revelation came as a shock to Mike's mother, who had never heard those details before. It was especially difficult for her to know that her son was in the middle of a freezing lake, screaming for help, and that she couldn't have been there to help him. This information was something she struggled to live with. Denise's trial lasted for 4 days, and the jury deliberated for 8 hours before finding Denise guilty of all charges. The judge sentenced Denise to life in prison after being convicted of committing murder. 5 months after her conviction, Denise's assets from Mike's estate were awarded to her and Mike's daughter. To escape prosecution on 3 counts of insurance fraud, Denise agreed to sign them over to her daughter. However, as part of the deal, Mike and Denise's daughter had to agree not to use any of the money on Denise's legal fees. If her daughter failed to comply with this condition, she would have to repay the state $150,000. In January 2020, Denise appealed for her conviction and sentence. Her attorney argued that the Florida First District Court of Appeal should overturn the conviction because there was insufficient evidence to prove her involvement in the murder of her first husband. Several months later, in November, the court overturned Denise's conviction for murder, but the conspiracy to commit murder charge remained. Denise remains in prison at the Florida Women's Reception Center, while Brian Winchester is serving his kidnapping sentence at the Wakulla Correctional Institution. Since Mike Williams was murdered in 2000, his mother has not had any contact with her granddaughter. However, Denise has made her intentions clear to Mike's mother. She has told her that if she tried to reopen a criminal investigation into Mike's disappearance, she would never see her granddaughter again. In an episode of Cold Case Files in 2023, Mike's mother expressed her desire to see her granddaughter and tell her how amazing her son was and how much he loved her. However, according to sources, the two are still estranged. The reasons behind this estrangement remain unclear, but it is unfortunate that they have been unable to reconcile. The disappearance of Mike Williams on Lake Seminole was a tragic story of love and betrayal, but also a testament to the unwavering faith of his mother. Despite years of searching and countless setbacks, she never gave up hope that her son was still alive. Her determination and steadfast faith serve as a powerful reminder of the enduring bond between a mother and her child. In a world where the sacred bond of marriage is meant to provide a sanctuary of love and support, the tragic case of Micah Miller reveals a disturbing reality: that the very person who vowed to cherish and protect her would ultimately be the one to drive her to the brink of despair. Micah's story is a chilling reminder that even in the most seemingly idyllic relationships, the darkest secrets can lurk beneath the surface, waiting to be uncovered. From harrowing details of long-term abuse to the heart-wrenching moments leading up to her untimely death, every aspect of this case exposes a profound betrayal that would shake the community to its core. On April 27, 2024, the quiet community of Myrtle Beach, South Carolina was shaken to its core by the devastating death of 30-year-old Micah Miller, a vibrant and ambitious woman who had been married to a local pastor, John Paul J.P. Miller, for nearly 7 years. However, the picture-perfect facade of their relationship hid a much darker truth. As the investigation into Micah's death unfolded, a complex and heartbreaking tale would emerge, one that would challenge the community's faith and test the limits of the justice system. What dark secrets lay hidden within Micah and JP's marriage, and how could a man of God allegedly commit such a profound betrayal of trust? The search for answers in Micah's case has become a rallying cry, as her family and supporters demand accountability and a reckoning for the systematic failures that may have contributed to her untimely demise. Micah and JP first crossed paths when she was just 14 or 15 years old, when she and her family began attending the Solid Rock Church in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. At that time, JP was serving as the leader of the youth group in the same church. Despite the significant age gap, JP was 28 years old when he first met Micah. The two developed a friendship. When Micah was 18, it was JP who officiated her marriage to one of his friends, Jeremy Days. Both Micah and Jeremy were involved in the church. Micah had several responsibilities at the church, including working with the media team, while Jeremy was in charge of the sports ministry. After some time, Micah would go on to become John Paul's secretary and babysitter for his growing family. Mind you, JP had already been married to Allison and was the father of 5 children. One of these days, when Micah was babysitting for JP's kids, Allison found her husband and the babysitter in a compromising position. The two had clearly developed feelings for each other. The fallout from this revelation was swift. Both Micah and JP's marriages ended in divorce in 2016, as their extramarital affair was exposed to the public. Just a year later, the 23-year-old Micah would find herself thrust into a new role, that of stepmother to JP's 5 children, as the two wed and Micah became the pastor's wife. In her position, Micah took on even greater responsibilities within the church, leading worship, overseeing the women's and youth ministries, and even traveling abroad on mission trips to Kenya. Her dedication to her faith in the congregation was evident, but the true nature of her relationship with JP remained shrouded in darkness. As Micah's role within the Solid Rock Church grew, So did the allegations of abuse and manipulation that she endured at the hands of her husband, JP. According to Micah's own sworn affidavit, she had been subject to a torrent of mistreatment, including emotional, sexual, spiritual, financial, and even physical abuse throughout her marriage. Micah's family and friends would later come forward with harrowing details of the torment she faced. They alleged that JP had hacked into Micah's personal accounts, sending messages designed to discredit her and undermine her credibility. Even more disturbingly were the claims that JP had installed multiple tracking devices on Micah's vehicle, an apparent effort to maintain an iron grip on her movements and activities. Despite the overwhelming control JP exerted over Micah, she refused to be cowed. In January 2023, Micah made the courageous decision to separate from her husband, taking the first steps towards reclaiming her freedom. This decision, however, was not an easy one, as Micah knew all too well the risks she faced in defying JP's will. Just months later, in October of last year, Micah filed for divorce, determined to break free from the shackles of her abusive marriage. This bold move was undoubtedly a testament to Micah's strength and resilience as she faced the daunting prospect of rebuilding her life in the wake of the trauma she had endured. Micah's decision to leave JP did not come without a price. A couple of times she contacted the police after sensing that someone was tailing and stalking her, which made her apprehensive as she made an effort to detach herself from the bond of marriage. Micah reported that her tires had been slashed and a tracking device had been found on her car, further fueling her concerns about JP's obsessive need to maintain control over her. These incidents only served to heighten Micah's sense of vulnerability as she navigated the treacherous waters of a divorce while constantly looking over her shoulder, fearing the repercussions of her actions. The months leading up to Micah's tragic death were marked by a series of disturbing incidents that only served to heighten the sense of unease and suspicion surrounding her relationship with JP. As Micah fought to extricate herself from the marriage and assert her independence, JP responded with a series of increasingly desperate and sinister tactics designed to maintain his control over her. In February 2024, Micah's fragile sense of freedom was shattered when JP orchestrated her involuntary hospitalization. Under the guise of concern for her well-being, JP claimed that Micah was not properly taking her medication, a pretext that allowed him to have her forcibly admitted to a psychiatric facility. However, Micah's family and friends saw through this ruse, firmly believing that JP had exaggerated her mental health issues as a means of further undermining her and solidifying his control over the situation. The implications of this incident were chilling. JP took Micah to a psychiatric hospital against her wish, which showed his readiness to exploit the system meant for safeguarding susceptible individuals. He had weaponized Micah's mental health struggles, twisting them to suit his own nefarious ends and leaving her feeling trapped and powerless in the face of his schemes. The following month, in March 2024, Micah's sense of security was shattered once again when she reported to the police that her tires had been slashed. This, however, marked just one of the instances in a sequence of events that comprised destruction, since it was later established that there was a tracker on Micah's car. Such findings escalated Micah's fear and suspicion as she was separating and heading toward divorce. The fact that the tracking device had been used was chilling, showing how JP could go to all lengths in order to control and keep tabs on every move Micah made, even as she tried to escape his grip. The knowledge that she was being watched, that her every step was being tracked, must have been a constant source of anxiety and dread for Micah, a reminder of the power that JP still held over her. As the divorce proceedings continued, Micah filed for spousal support, with a hearing scheduled for June 5th. This was a defiant gesture and a clear message that she would not be intimidated by JP's efforts to hold on to her money forever. However, the tensions between the couple were further exacerbated in mid-March when Micah requested JP $2,000 for a trip. JP did not provide Micah with the money she requested. His refusal was rooted in his suspicion that the money would not be used for the purpose she claimed, which further highlights the control he had over their finances and decision-making. Around the same time as this financial conflict, JP had Micah hospitalized using his power of attorney over her care. While Micah was hospitalized, JP took her purse and car keys and retrieved her car from a parking lot. JP claimed that he did this because he was worried about what Micah might do when she was released from the hospital. However, it was JP who threatened Micah's family, stating that he would prevent them from seeing her in the hospital if they did not cooperate with him. Micah's father, Michael, requested to see the papers that gave JP power of attorney over Micah's care. Upon inspection, Michael noticed that the documents were neither signed nor notarized, suggesting they were not official. The stage was set for a tragic and heart-wrenching conclusion to Micah's story, as the noose of JP's control tightened around her neck. The tragic events that unfolded on April 27, 2024, would become the focal point of the investigation into Micah's untimely demise. The details that emerged in the aftermath painted a complex and disturbing picture, one that would only deepen the sense of mystery and suspicion surrounding her death. On the morning of April 27th, surveillance footage captured Micah leaving her apartment in Myrtle Beach at 11:38 a.m. She then drove to Dick's Pawn Shop, where security cameras recorded her entering the store at 12:12 p.m. and independently purchasing a Sig Sauer handgun. Micah's phone search history also showed that she had looked up directions to Lumber River State Park, a remote location in North Carolina. Just before 3 p.m. the same day, Micah placed a desperate call to 911. During the call, she asked the dispatcher to trace the location of her phone, indicating that she was in a national park and feared for her life. Micah's final words to the operator were a chilling declaration of her intentions. She was about to take her own life. However, the 911 call has become the subject of intense scrutiny and speculation. Some online conspiracy theorists claim to have detected a man's voice in the background, suggesting that Micah may have been coerced or even forced to make the call. Others have gone as far as to suggest that the 911 call was entirely fabricated, perhaps generated using AI technology as part of an elaborate scheme orchestrated by JP. Just over an hour and a half after Micah's 911 call, a kayaker reported a woman's body in the waters of the Lumber River. It was Micah, having died from a single gunshot wound to the head. Her black Honda Accord was found in the park's parking lot, containing a Sig Sauer gun case, a box of ammunition, and a receipt for the firearm she had purchased earlier that day. The official cause of death, as determined by the North Carolina medical examiner, was a suicide by gunshot. However, Micah's family vehemently dispute this conclusion, citing the numerous bruises, scratches, and defensive wounds found on the body. They believe that Micah may have been forced or coerced into taking her own life, rather than making the decision willingly. JP maintains he had no involvement in Micah's death, asserting that he was not present when she passed away. His alibi is based on his whereabouts at a sporting event in Charleston, South Carolina, approximately 3 hours away from where Micah's body was found. Multiple eyewitnesses have corroborated his presence at the event, and license plate readers tracked his vehicle en route to and from Charleston, further supporting his claim. The investigation into Micah's death was further complicated by a number of inconsistencies and unanswered questions. The presence of multiple shell casings at the scene, for instance, raised concerns that Micah may have been the victim of foul play rather than a self-inflicted gunshot wound. Moreover, Micah's family and friends were adamant that her actions and behavior in the days leading up to her death were not consistent with someone planning to take their own life. She had a hair appointment scheduled for the following week and had made plans to attend church with her loved ones on the Sunday after her passing. As the investigation into Micah's death continued, the Robeson County Sheriff's Office and the FBI worked together to gather more evidence and piece together the events of that fateful day. However, the public outcry for justice and accountability only grew louder, with Micah's family and supporters refusing to accept the official narrative of suicide. The suspicions surrounding JP's potential involvement in Micah's death remained in the central focus of the investigation. The allegations of abuse, manipulation, and financial impropriety that had plagued their marriage only added to the sense that there was more to the story than met the eye. Ultimately, the investigation into Micah's death would become a complex and multifaceted endeavor, one that would test the limits of the authorities' abilities to uncover the truth and provide the answers that Micah's family and the broader community so desperately sought. As the investigation into Micah's death continued, JP's behavior and statements only added to the sense of unease and suspicion surrounding his involvement in the tragedy. The details that emerged painted a picture of a man who was increasingly erratic and unpredictable. his actions and words seemingly designed to confuse and manipulate those around him. Just a day after Micah's body was discovered in the Lumber River, JP made a startling announcement to the congregation of the Solid Rock Church. Rather than addressing the congregation in a solemn and respectful manner, JP's words were casual and unsettling. He began by telling the congregation that there would be no altar call that day. Instead, he asked them to stand up as he made an announcement. JP then instructed the congregation to leave the church quietly and not discuss the announcement within the building. In a bizarre move, JP then asked the congregation to continue attending church and serving in their roles, stating that he would be taking a break for a few days or weeks. He then delivered the shocking news that his wife had passed away, declaring that it was self-induced and had occurred in North Carolina. JP's demeanor during this announcement was equally unsettling. He appeared to be going on adrenaline, as he put it, and asked the congregation to pray for him and his children. He also claimed that Micah wasn't well mentally and needed medication that was difficult to obtain. The pastor's words were particularly jarring given that Micah's body had been discovered less than 24 hours earlier, and the coroner had yet to determine the cause of death. The Robeson County Police were still treating the incident as a suspicious death, yet JP had already declared it as suicide, blaming Micah's mental illness. Despite the overwhelming evidence of abuse and manipulation that plagued their marriage, JP denied any wrongdoing. He claimed that the allegations of abuse were false and that he had never hurt Micah in any way. However, Micah's family and friends knew better, and they refused to accept his denials at face value. JP's actions in the days following Micah's death were equally disturbing. He pushed for immediate cremation, refusing to allow her family to view her body until they agreed to his demands. This only added to the sense that JP was trying to cover his tracks, to erase any evidence of his involvement in Micah's death. In a move that deepened the sense of unease and suspicion, JP hired a lawyer and issued letters for an end to the accusations against him. These letters were filled with veiled threats and intimidation, as if JP were trying to silence anyone who dared question his involvement in Micah's death. As the details of JP's behavior and statements emerged, the public outcry for justice and accountability only grew louder. Micah's family and friends, as well as the broader community, demanded answers and called for the authorities to take action against those responsible for her death. As the investigation into Micah's death continued, the FBI and U.S. Attorney's Office joined the probe, adding their considerable resources and expertise to the case. However, it remained unclear exactly what aspects of the investigation the federal authorities were focusing on. Micah's family expressed deep concerns about the thoroughness of the autopsy analysis. They spoke about the autopsy having no information related to gunshot residue and who it was that ordered the concerned authorities not to conduct these analyses. Secondly, the family also raised concerns related to the toxicology analysis of Micah, whether she was even in her senses at the time of her death, or was she under heavy substance influence. There was no record of any of that. The family's fears were compounded by the fact that Micah's body had been cremated shortly after her death, at the insistence of JP, making it impossible to conduct a second independent autopsy. This decision by JP only added to the growing suspicion that he had something to hide. As the investigation progressed, a range of theories emerged about JP's potential involvement in Micah's death. It was speculated by some that he might have used his boat to take Micah's body to the remote spot where it was found, or maybe this 911 call she made may also have just been part of a ruse. The security footage from the pawn shop where Micah purchased the gun also came under scrutiny, with some theorizing that the timestamps may have been altered to fit a particular narrative. The fact that JP had been reported to the police for transferring church funds to his personal account only added fuel to the fire as people began to question his motives and integrity. One of the most disturbing revelations to emerge from the investigation was the existence of Micah's detailed diaries, which she had kept as a record of the abuse she suffered at JP's hands. JP had called Micah's family over 100 times, trying to retrieve the documents, further fueling suspicions that these papers were incriminating towards him, according to her family. These diaries now belonged to Micah's sister Sierra, who had been appointed as a special administrator for her estate, and they were seen as important pieces of evidence in the ongoing probe. Their contents promised to shed light on the true nature of JP and Micah's relationship and the events that led to her tragic death. Micah's family and friends remained steadfast in their belief that JP's abusive behavior and manipulation had driven her to take her own life. They pointed to the numerous police reports Micah had filed, detailing her fears for her safety and the harassment that she endured at JP's hands. The allegations of multiple affairs and financial impropriety only added to the sense that JP was a man consumed by his own desires and willing to stop at nothing to maintain control over those around him. As the investigation continued, more and more people came forward with stories of JP's inappropriate behavior and the harm he had caused to those in his orbit. The tragic death of Micah Miller sent shockwaves through the community, sparking a range of reactions and consequences in the aftermath. The Solid Rock Church, where JP served as a pastor, found itself at the center of the controversy. Church leaders reported receiving a barrage of harassing phone calls and messages from those seeking answers and demanding accountability. The situation was no less dire for those directly involved in the investigation. The coroner who had performed the medical examination on Micah's body found themselves the target of threats, as did Johnny Jacobs, the fisherman who had first discovered Micah's body in the Lumber River. Micah's family, led by her sister Sierra, remained steadfast in the refusal to accept the official narrative surrounding her death. They were convinced that Micah's death had been staged and premeditated by JP, and they were determined to uncover the truth, no matter the cost. The family's unwavering commitment to seeking justice for Micah was a testament to their love and devotion, as well as their deep-seated belief that the authorities had failed to fully investigate the circumstances surrounding her demise. As the details of the case continue to emerge, the public outcry for action to be taken against JP only grows louder. Micah's supporters, both within the community and across social media, demand that the authorities hold the pastor accountable for his alleged role in her death. The aftermath of Micah's death is a complex and multifaceted affair, with the reverberations felt across the community and beyond. The harassment of those involved in the case, the unwavering determination of Micah's family, and the ongoing calls for accountability all serve as a stark reminder of the profound impact that this tragedy has had on all those touched by it.